Chapter 78. Hong Xian. The remaining man howled in grief. "I'll fight you to the death," he roared. His entire body transformed into a shooting star as he charged toward Shan Wanshui with his sword. His posture was similar to Long Wanli's, but his aura was far inferior. A ray of light flashed past. The burly man stood up with his sword in hand, only 6 moves. He then burst out laughing. The burly man's attacks weren't as flashy as the others. Every move was powerful and fast as lightning, but the others couldn't even parry. "The commander is mighty." Cheers could be heard from the sidelines. The deaths of the 3 men did not cause any ripples in the hearts of the others. They were already used to it. Rinpochen looked on helplessly as the 3 men died without a complete corpse in the blink of an eye. One man was split in half from the middle, one at the waist, and the last man was split diagonally from shoulder to waist. Fresh blood and internal organs splattered all over the ground. Such a cruel scene sent chills down Rinpochen's spine. At the same time, his stomach was in turmoil. The last time Long Wanli challenged the Empress, he was beaten into the ground with just 1 move. By the time he was able to move after being poked by Caretaker Shi's electric baton, the square had already started to fill in the holes. In addition, both sides used a sword and a palm to determine the victor. Rinpochen couldn't see the duel clearly and only saw Long Wanli's back view. Even though he felt it was a pity that Long Wanli was dead, Rinpochen was more excited to see a duel between 2 experts. At this moment, what Rinpochen saw was a bloody massacre. The shock he received and the feeling of barbarism and bloodshed were far greater than the previous time. It could even be said that it was something he had never felt before in his life. He always felt that death was far away from him. Even though he almost lost his head when he first arrived in this world, he managed to survive in the end. This made him, who rarely saw death, feel a sense of alienation from it. However, it was different this time. The brutal massacre was happening in front of him. It made him realize that this world was far crueler than what he had always seen. Just as Rinpochen stood there with his mind blank, the soldiers at the side of the field had already started to clean up. They dug a hole under the broken stone slab and threw the severed limbs into it. Then they started to fill the hole with soil. Not long after, the entire hole was filled up. All that was left was for the stonemason to install another stone slab. It wasn't until those soldiers left that the onlookers dispersed, leaving only Rinpochen standing there with ice-cold hands and feet. After a long time, Rinpochen dragged his heavy footsteps back to the beast park. Gun Gun and Tian Tian had already fallen asleep on the stone slab. Rinpochen's head was in a mess as images kept flashing through his mind. Suddenly, the horrifying scene of him being decapitated like the other 3 flashed across his mind. That scene made him feel suffocated, and he abruptly sat up on the bed. That one move made him break out in a cold sweat. No matter what, I can't become like that, like those 3 people," Rinpochen muttered to himself. "This isn't Earth, it's a different world. It's not as safe as Earth, and human lives aren't that precious. In the future, I can't just laze around like this. I have to work harder and take the initiative to climb up. Only when my position is so high that others can't move will I be safe. The higher my position, the stronger my importance, the safer I will be, and the further away I will be from the threat of death. I have the backing of a civilized world that is far superior to this place. How can I continue to be muddle-headed and put my life in the hands of others? If it's possible, I want to become stronger too." Countless chaotic thoughts flashed through Rinpochen's mind. Finally, they merged into one. He wanted to become stronger, have a higher position, and make himself safer. Only then would he be able to survive in this world. Even though he had such thoughts in the past, they were never as clear, firm, and real as they were now. As a youth who often had fantasies and an ordinary person, the sudden revelation of another side of this world shattered the muddle-headedness that he had been muddle-headed all this while. He felt that the things that he had been working hard and doing in the past were really too little. It was far from enough. Especially after he had gotten rid of the crisis of survival and gained a foothold, he actually began to relax. He had underestimated this world. After tossing and turning for a long time, he finally fell into a deep sleep. Early the next morning, he was woken up by a knock on his door. He didn't sleep well that night. Even after he fell asleep, everything that happened at the scene would surface in his mind from time to time, forming a dream. When he woke up, he realized that he was drenched in sweat. He picked up a bowl of water and gulped it down. Rinpochen got up and pushed open the door. He saw Caretaker Shi outside. "Why is your face so pale?" Caretaker Shi looked at Rinpochen and asked curiously. "Maybe I caught a cold last night. Your small physique is too weak." Caretaker Shi laughed boorishly. The Imperial Kitchen asked you to visit them when you are free. Ren Baqin nodded. I got it. I will go after I finish my work at the Honglu Bureau today. Brother Ren, you can arrange for me to come over. Caretaker Shi waved his hand and left. Ren Baqin looked at Caretaker Shi's back as he left. Caretaker Shi still treated him the same as before, but he felt that something was different. It was because his state of mind was different. The Aboriginals had a warm side, a straightforward and adorable side, but also a cruel side. This was what he felt just now. After washing up, he picked up his official robe. This was what he relied on to survive. After putting on his robe, he left the beast park. When he passed by the plaza, he could still smell the lingering smell of blood in the air. However, he didn't show any signs of abnormality. When he arrived at the Honglu Bureau, he picked up the book, 300 Song Poems, and continued to memorize it. After a while, he felt tired and went to the backyard to watch some people from the Honglu Bureau practice martial arts. Xiong Pai was still playing with that rock that weighed 2 to 3 tons. No one came to the Honglu Bureau for the whole day. Mr. Emptiness and Ning Kaichen, who arrived earlier, didn't have anything to do. Ren Baqin was happy to stay in his room. In the afternoon, he reckoned that it was almost time. He bade farewell and went straight to the Imperial Kitchen. When Ren Baqin arrived, the Imperial Kitchen had just delivered dinner to the Empress. Everyone was sitting there resting. When they saw Ren Baqin, they greeted him one after another. Brother Ren. The greetings of Brother Ren. Ren Baqin smiled and asked, Where's Caretaker go? He went to deliver dinner to Her Majesty. Looking at the time, he should be back soon, someone immediately replied. Ren Baqin nodded his head. Are you looking for me because of Her Majesty's birthday banquet? Brother Ren, it's like this. Caretaker Go hopes that you can participate in making some dishes. After all, we have just familiarized ourselves with your spices. Now that Her Majesty's birthday banquet is just around the corner, we don't have time to slowly experiment. Ren Baqin nodded his head, found a place to sit down, and waited for Caretaker Go to return. Not long after, Caretaker Go came back and saw Ren Baqin. His face twitched for a long time and he called out, Brother Ren. Forget it, call me Storyteller Ren in the future. This is my current position in the palace. Ren Baqin waved his hand and said, Seeing that you are in a difficult position, I won't make things difficult for you. Chapter 79. Ren Baqin tilted his head and looked at him. Then why did you look like you were eating tea just now? Up to you. Ren Baqin shrugged. Brother Ren, the dishes for Her Majesty's birthday banquet. Caretaker Go called out again. This time he was much more straightforward. It seemed like the hurdle in his heart had been overcome. Make 2, 1 normal and 1 unorthodox. Let's see if those people are to Her Majesty's liking. If Her Majesty is happy, we won't torture them. If Her Majesty is unhappy, they can forget about having a good meal, Ren Baqin said. Upon hearing Ren Baqin's words, everyone in the Imperial Kitchen laughed. How are the arrangements for the banquet? How many people to a table? How many dishes? Ren Baqin asked again. A table for 2, 6 dishes and a bowl of soup for each person. Her Majesty said that this year's banquet will be different from previous years, Caretaker Go said. Ren Baqin nodded his head. This wasn't much. It was simply too easy to come up with 6 main dishes from the Chinese menu. Any birthday banquet or wedding banquet would have at least a dozen dishes. Meatballs, 4 happiness meatballs, twice-cooked pork and so on. He was sure that the tongues of those who came would be swallowed. Ren Baqin stayed in the Imperial Kitchen until midnight. He first picked 8 dishes and let the Imperial Kitchen chefs practice making them. When the time came, he just had to pick 6 dishes and make them into the menu. As for the other menu, Ren Baqin was prepared to go back and study the dark cuisine. When the time came, he just had to pick 6 dishes and 1 soup. If he chose this, Ren Baqin was confident that he would definitely give those who came this time an unforgettable experience. A rather unforgettable kind. He guaranteed that they would come back to the banquet next year after eating their fill. The following morning, Ren Baqin was listening to Ning Kaichen brag. It seemed that he realized that Ren Baqin was the only one who could listen to him after going 1 round yesterday. Early in the morning, he came over not long after Ren Baqin arrived and told Ren Baqin the legendary stories of his journey. Ren Baqin was very interested in many of the things he talked about. For example, the local conditions and customs of various places. In the morning, a large group of carriages entered Lan City. The convoy first stopped at a location on Jingyang Street. There were 3 shops there and all of them were sealed with seals on their doors. The signboard above said Wanjialu. A man with a mustache and wearing a purple silk robe came down from the carriage. With his hands behind his back, he raised his head and looked at the 3 sealed shops. "Third uncle, is this our family business in Lon City?" A man came down from the other 2 carriages. They were both in their 20s, one handsome and the other handsome. "Not bad. Your third uncle and the others are all in prison. This time we came for this matter." The man called fifth uncle said. "These barbarians," one of the valiant-looking young men said indignantly, his face filled with anger. "Silence. This isn't our home. Remember, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. If something happens to you here, no one can save you." The middle-aged man frowned. "I know I was wrong." The valiant man quickly lowered his head and said, "You two know what we're going to do this time, right?" The middle-aged man asked. "I know. But fifth uncle, is that cheesy xiao really as beautiful as a flower?" The handsome young man asked. "Not just that. When I came to Dayo in the past, I saw her from afar. She was an exceptional beauty. I brought you two here just in case. Don't think too much about it. There are a lot of talented young men with the same idea in every country. Now the Yun nation's imperial court is in chaos. That man alone holds power and rejects dissidents. The undercurrent is surging, and we have no choice but to find a place to retreat. There are many wealthy families in Great Xia. Even though we have already made arrangements, it won't be easy to gain a foothold. I was the one who strongly advocated for Dayo. Dayo doesn't lack brave generals and warriors, but it lacks capable people who can govern the country. Even though the current empress of Dayo is a young woman, her breadth of mind is far from that of an ordinary person. If the two of you can display your talents and interest her, you might be able to gain a foothold in Dayo. Unfortunately, even though your third uncle has been managing the business for many years, he is greedy by nature. Not only did he lose himself, but he also lost the business here. The reputation of the Zhang family has also been ruined by him. This time we are here mainly to salvage the situation here. As for the rest, it's fine as long as you know it. There's no need to force it." "Got it, fifth uncle. We believe what you said. In our family, fifth uncle's foresight and knowledge are incomparable to others. We are well aware of it. However, there is a little doubt. If we stay here and people find out, I'm afraid we won't be able to explain to our family," the handsome young man said after they looked at each other. "You don't have to worry too much about this. I found 2 people early on who are enough to impersonate you in the family. As long as you live in seclusion, you don't have to worry about being discovered. Even if people find out about your situation here, it's just a coincidence that you have the same name and looks. The family can still settle this matter. Let's go to the Honglu Bureau." The middle-aged man waved his hand at them and ended the conversation. After they returned to the car, their hearts weren't calm. They knew what the middle-aged man meant. He wanted them to find an official position here. Even though they didn't like this barren land, they had no other choice for the sake of their family. However, they were curious about Qi Zixiao, whom the middle-aged man called an exceptional beauty. They wanted to see what the Empress of Dayo, who was praised so highly by their fifth uncle, looked like. The carriage arrived at the Honglu Bureau. A moment later, Ren Baqian received the news and went out with Xiong Pai. At a glance, he saw the 3 people standing at the entrance and the carriage a little further away. In the middle was a middle-aged man with an elegant face and a mustache. The 2 youths behind him were extremely good-looking. They are here to use their beauty trap. Ren Baqian thought to himself when he saw the 2 of them. They are trying to snatch my food. I have to suppress them even without Her Majesty's orders. The other party was stunned when they saw him. This Honglu deputy wasn't an aboriginal, nor was he a remnant citizen of the Hao nation. He looked more like someone from Great Xia or the Yun nation. This meant that someone was 1 step ahead of them. This thought emerged in the minds of the few of them. How do I address the few of you? Where are you from? Why are you here? Ren Baqian asked calmly. He was neither indifferent nor enthusiastic. I'm Zhang Junjing. These 2 are from the same family, Zhang Heqi and Zhang Heju. They know that Her Majesty's birthday is in a few days, so they specially brought gifts from the Yun nation. May I know how to address you, sir? My surname is Ren Baqian. You can also call me Deputy Ren. Ren Baqian smiled politely. Sir Ren, that's a good name. The Kunpeng spreads its wings for 8,000 miles and will definitely soar to the top. Zhang Heju, the handsome youth, praised. Chapter 80. How long has Sir Ren been in the Honglu Bureau? I've been to Lan City before, but this is the first time I've seen a foreigner serving as an official in Dayo. It's obvious that Her Majesty favors Sir Ren, which is admirable, Zhang Junjing said with a smile as he followed Ren Baqian into the Honglu Bureau with his 2 nephews. I've only been in this position for a short while. Rinpoche waved his hand. This matter couldn't be kept a secret, and anyone would find out after asking around. Oh. Zhang Juanjing's eyes flashed. I'll have to trouble you to fill out this form. Rinpoche took out 3 pieces of paper and handed it to the 3 nephews. After telling them what he needed, he sat behind the table and quietly observed them. Zhang Junjing was the leader among them, but this time the main characters were probably the other 2 gigolos. Where do you want to stay? Do you have a place to stay? Rinpoche asked after seeing them finish writing. I'll have to trouble sir to arrange it. Zhang Junjing cupped his hands. Xiong Pai, bring them to the 2 courtyards beside Ning Kaichen, Rinpoche instructed. All right, deputy. Come with me, Xiong Pai shouted at the few of them. Thank you, sir. Zhang Junjing and the other 2 nephews cupped their hands. Rinpoche nodded and fell into deep thought after they left. These people looked like they came from big clans. They were different from ordinary people and had a sense of propriety in their words and actions. Even though they had always treated him with courtesy, Rinpoche didn't have a good impression of them. It was entirely due to the changes in his mentality over the past 2 days that made him feel a sense of crisis. At the same time, he was also thinking about a problem. Now that he was an official in Dayo, what about the people from other nations? Could they? There weren't any in the past, but that didn't mean that there wouldn't be any in the future. In the afternoon, 2 groups of people arrived one after another. One group was from Great Xia and had the surname Lien. The other group was also from the Yun nation and had the surname Hong. Like the Zhang family, these 2 groups of people came in a long line with carriages and horses. They also brought a lot of goods or gifts. Rinpoche asked Xiong Pai to bring them over. When Xiong Pai returned, he muttered, "Sir, those bastards don't know what's good for them. They actually complained that the conditions are too simple and crude. They're all like this. In my opinion, it's already not bad, but they're still complaining about this and that." Rinpoche squinted his eyes slightly. He knew that Xiong Pai was talking about the people from the Lien family who had just been sent over. From the young master of the Lien family to the servants, all of them had an arrogant look on their faces, especially that young master of the Lien family. His eyeballs were almost on top of his head. "Next time, let them find their own accommodation," Rinpoche said casually. That night, Rinpoche handed over the task to someone else and returned to Earth. For the past 3 days, he had been studying and thinking in his room. His mind was completely focused on that world. There were too many aspects to consider. In the past, he was like a spinning top that would only spin once the rope was pulled. Other than saving his own life, his other thoughts were only to create something that existed on Earth or how to earn money. He had never systematically considered what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. However, during these 3 days on Earth, he had figured out his future path. What he was good at was nothing more than relying on the Earth and being famous in the world. As for other aspects, needless to say, he reckoned that no one in Dayo above the age of 10 was weaker than him. As for intellect, he was just an ordinary person with no foresight or wisdom. All he had was the technology, culture, and various theoretical knowledge that had been developed on Earth. This was the only thing that he could show that would make people value him. Even though the individual strength in this world was very strong, they were far from being strong enough to ignore technology. Technology was also very important to them, and culture and various theories were equally important to Dayo. In the past, he was thinking of doing something to earn some money and please the Empress. But now it seemed that those were just small things. If he wanted people to value him, he had to systematically improve the various aspects of Dayo's technology and academic knowledge. Only in this way could his position not be shaken by anything and not be affected by anything. Of course, cozying up to the Empress was indispensable. In this world he knew nothing, and had no foundation at all. In this short period of time, only by cozying up to the Empress would he be safe and sound and be able to do things that could show his value. Rinpoche thought about it a lot. Even though there were still some flaws and it wasn't very comprehensive, he already had a clear goal. The rest could only be slowly perfected in the future. When he returned to that world again, his eyes were clear and he completely knew what to do and how to do it. Brother Rin, you seem a little different today," Caretaker Sure said curiously when he saw Rinpoche in the morning. "I have figured out some things that I have never understood," Rinpoche said with a smile. "If you can't figure it out, just throw it aside. When the time comes, you will know what to do," Caretaker Sure said indifferently, causing Rinpoche to smile. When he arrived at the Honglu Bureau, Qi Heng and Qi Sheng were still standing at the entrance. When they saw him, they greeted him one after another. "Did anyone come yesterday?" Rinpoche asked casually. There was a group of carriages and a group of 3 people riding on horses. "I saw Xiong Pai bringing them away." "It should have been arranged," Qi Heng replied. Ren Baqin nodded his head to indicate that he understood. When he entered the deputy's room, a burly man was sitting behind the table with a sluggish look on his face. If he drooled, he would be a living retard. Ren Baqin patted the table. Official Registrar Shi. That burly man quivered. When he saw that it was Ren Baqin, he hurriedly stood up and said, "Deputy Ren, you are back. Have you settled the matter?" "Yes," Ren Baqin said faintly. "Did anything happen yesterday?" This person was the official registrar of the Honglu Bureau. Ren Baqin asked him to make the arrangements yesterday. The reason was very easy to find. The Empress was arranging other matters. In any case, it was impossible for him to confront the Empress. The Empress also knew that he would disappear once every few days. 2 groups of people came yesterday. "I have arranged for them to go over," that burly man said. "If there is nothing else, I will take my leave." "Thank you very much." Ren Baqin revealed a smile. The burly man grinned at Ren Baqin. Without saying anything else, he immediately left the house. Ren Baqin walked 1 round in the house and then came to the backyard. Sure enough, Xiongpai was playing with that huge rock there. When he saw Ren Baqin, he hurriedly threw the huge rock like a rubber ball and ran over. "You continue with your training. I will take a look here," Ren Baqin said as he felt the huge rock landing on the ground. In the afternoon, when Ren Baqin and Xiongpai were staying in the room, a low-ranking official who was usually in charge of the affairs at the Honglu Bureau's courier station ran over to report, "Sir, there is a fight over there." However, there wasn't much panic on his face. It seemed that he was just here to inform Ren Baqin about this matter. In any case, they were all from abroad. As long as they didn't damage the courier station, the people from the Honglu Bureau wouldn't care at all. Ren Baqin leaned back and asked, "Did they kill anyone?" "Sir, they weren't when I came." That person laughed. At this moment, Deputy Ren's manner of speaking was very similar to Deputy Qiji in the past. "What happened?" Ren Baqin then asked. "I'm not too sure either." "In any case, they quarreled for a while before fighting," that person said. "Which courtyard?" "Courtyard number 2 and 8. Ren Baqin thought for a while. It was Mr. Emptiness and the people from the Lien family from Great Xia. Chapter 81. Ren Baqin brought Xiongpai and the burly man named Gan Gu out of the Honglu Bureau. His footsteps were not hurried and it was as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. However, his mind was thinking about how to resolve this matter. After all, they were here to deliver gifts to the Empress. If they couldn't resolve this matter properly in a private fight, it would make them look incompetent and cause more trouble. The Honglu Bureau wasn't far from the post house. They just had to walk around the corner to get there. From afar, Ren Baqin could see a group of people surrounding the place and could even hear their cheers. The group of burly men outside were mostly Dayo people. At this moment, they had turned into a crowd of onlookers, cheering and applauding one after another. However, when Ren Baqin got closer, he also saw a few familiar figures. For example, Ning Caichen's petite figure was squeezing through the crowd. After spending a long time trying to squeeze through the crowd, Ning Caichen was suddenly pushed back 5 or 6 steps and fell on his butt. Ning Caichen cursed his bad luck after he got up. He realized that he couldn't squeeze through the crowd, so he jumped outside the crowd like a spring. When Ren Baqin came over, he saw this scene. Suddenly, he inexplicably thought of the time when he watched Long Wanli challenge the Empress. Wasn't it the same as Ning Caichen? A feeling of empathy arose in his heart. The aboriginals were too much of a bully. Ning Caichen jumped, but he could only see a small part of the fight. This made him extremely anxious. He loved watching such a big show the most. Why was he late for such a big show? At this moment, he felt someone pat him on the back. He quickly turned his head and saw Xiongpai's wall-like figure. Soon after, he saw Ren Baqin looking at him with an embarrassed expression on his face. Xiongpai's body was like a wall. Ning Caichen didn't feel embarrassed at all. When he saw Ren Baqin, he quickly pulled him and said, "Deputy Ren, there is a fight going on inside. I don't know if their brains are smashed. Quickly go in and see what's going on." Ren Baqin looked at Ning Caichen and pondered. You can't wait for their brains to be smashed, right? You really can't judge a book by its cover. Xiongpai. Ren Baqin turned his head and called out to Xiongpai. Xiongpai immediately understood. He stretched his arms forward, picked up the 2 people in front of Ren Baqin, and placed them to the side. The 2 of them felt themselves being lifted into the air. They immediately turned their heads and wanted to curse, but when they saw Xiongpai's figure, they glared at him instead. With Xiongpai clearing the way, it was much easier for Ren Baqin to get in. Ning Caichen, who was behind him, hurriedly followed behind. He blindly followed Ren Baqin's every step for fear that he would be squeezed out again. By the time there were no more people in front of him, Renbachian had already entered the innermost circle and was able to see the scene clearly. The one who attacked was not Mr. Emptiness as he had expected. He was coughing up blood at the side. 4 delicate girls were circling around a black-clothed old man, throwing punches and palms at him. Although the black-clothed old man wasn't injured, he was trapped and unable to break out. Those 4 ladies were naturally the ones who carried the sedan. Upon seeing this scene, Renbachian was finally sure that they weren't hired. This thought had been going around in his mind for a few days. Today he was finally able to confirm it. As for the black-clothed old man, he was an old butler of the Lien family. He had extraordinary skills, and if it weren't for the tacit cooperation of these 4 ladies, it would have been difficult to trap him. However, they were only able to trap him. Mr. Lien Baoqing, who was at the back, was watching the fight with a fierce look on his face. He wasn't happy that he couldn't deal with these ladies even after such a long time. At this moment, someone beside him said something. He looked up and immediately saw Xiong Pai's huge figure. If this barbarian was here, then the deputy would definitely be here as well. A ruthless look flashed across Lien Baoqing's face. Lien Baoqing beat them to death. Everyone in the crowd immediately heard this sentence. A few beautiful ladies actually wanted to beat them to death. How vicious and merciless. When Renbachian heard this, he was stunned. He looked to the opposite side and saw that Lien Baoqing had just shifted his gaze to the side as if he didn't see Renbachian. However, Renbachian clearly saw Lien Baoqing shifting his gaze away from him. With Xiong Pai's huge figure, it was impossible for him not to see it. When Renbachian thought about how Lien Baoqing had complained a few days ago, he sneered in his heart. Was he trying to humiliate him? At this moment, the situation of the battle suddenly changed. Following Lien Baoqing's shout, although Lien Cheng's aura didn't change, his moves became much more ferocious. Suddenly, a delicate cry was heard. One of the young ladies flipped backward, and a white light flashed from her abdomen to her neck. Her clothes were cut into 2 and her breasts were exposed. However, a line of blood spurted out from the abdomen of that young lady. At this moment, everyone realized that there was a soft sword in Lien Baoqian's hand. Like a venomous snake, it tried to bite the other 3. If this young lady hadn't dodged in time, her abdomen would have been cut open. Even now, she was still severely injured. Originally, the 4 young ladies could only trap Lien Baoqian, who was unarmed. Now that there was one less person and Lien Baoqian had a weapon in his hand, the situation immediately changed. The few of them were immediately surrounded by danger. In just a short while, a few more wounds appeared on their bodies. Seeing this situation, Mr. Emptiness coughed even more violently. Originally, he was using a handkerchief to cover his mouth. The handkerchief was stained with traces of blood, but now, he directly spurted out a mouthful of blood. Like a sharp arrow, it wasn't shot toward the old man in the middle of the battlefield, but directly toward Lien Baoqing's face. "Be careful, mister," someone suddenly shouted from the side. A burly man unsheathed his long saber and blocked the blood arrow. When the blood arrow hit the long saber, it immediately lost its strength and fell to the ground. Then a scene that shocked everyone happened. The place where the blood splashed on the long saber seemed to have melted. First it softened. Then half of the long saber fell to the ground with a clang. Lien Baoqing was shocked by this situation. If even a steel saber was like this, he would shudder in fear if the blood were to hit him. A streak of green flashed across his face. His gaze toward Mr. Emptiness was filled with a wild, murderous intent. Renbachian was also surprised. How was that blood that was spurted out? It was obviously strong acid, wasn't it? It was impossible for human blood to be corrosive. Could it be that there was also super strong gastric acid? Renbachian had always heard the phrase, "I spit on you." Today he had learned something new. If this Mr. Emptiness spat on someone's face, it wouldn't be as simple as disfigurement. Kill them, including that sickly guy. Go kill them. I want to hack them into pieces. Lien Baoqing had a crazy look on his face. Hearing his shout, Renbachian knew that this show couldn't continue. If he continued to watch, his brain would really be smashed to pieces. With a gloomy face, Renbachian turned his head and said to Xiong Pai, "Stop them. If anyone dares to make a move after I shout for them to stop, kill them without mercy." This was Dayo's imperial capital. If they continued to stir up trouble, he would be done for. Chapter 82. After Renbachian shouted, none of the people in the field stopped, or rather they didn't dare to stop. If they stopped and the other party didn't, they would immediately fall into a disadvantageous position. Furthermore, they simply didn't have the time to see who shouted. Xiong Pai, separate them. Those who don't listen, kill them. While Ren Baqin was speaking with a gloomy face, Lien Baoqing was still hooting, "Kill them, I want to skin them to use as cushions for my chair. As for that sickly guy, I want to chop him into pieces." However, he was destined to fail. Xiong Pai rushed into the group of people in a few steps. With a swing of his arm, he hit a young girl in front of him. Like a kite with a broken string, she flew out of the crowd while vomiting blood. Have tender feelings for the fairer sex? Xiong Pai didn't have such a thought. In any case, he would do whatever the deputy instructed him to do. The old man in black, Lien Baoqing, saw that there was no time to lose. The flexible sword in his hand turned into a myriad of stars and went straight for the other two young girls. The two young girls shouted angrily. As they dodged the cold rays, they turned their heads to look at Xiong Pai. Xiong Pai directly and efficiently kicked at the old man in black. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, the old man leaped into the air to avoid this kick. His flexible sword turned into a poisonous snake and went straight for Xiong Pai. Regardless of whether it was for self-protection or for other reasons, he actually attacked Xiong Pai. This action made Ren Baqin laugh incessantly. Xiong Pai let out a deep roar from his throat. This man, who had always given Ren Baqin the impression of a simple and honest man, finally revealed his fangs. He simply ignored those specks of cold light, raised his hands high and directly hammered down. Although Lien Baqin used his arms to block in time, how could he withstand Xiong Pai's brute force? Bang! Everyone in the field felt the ground under their feet shake. Lien Baqin was smashed into the ground by Xiong Pai. "Liangyu, Lianqi, stop, come back." Cough cough. Mr. Emptiness shouted. Because their sisters were sent flying, they were hesitating whether to attack Xiong Pai or the seriously injured Lien Baqin. Mr. Even though the two young girls knew that they were no match for Xiong Pai, they still glared at him fiercely before obeying his order to retreat. Ren Baqin frowned as he walked into the field. "What's going on?" No one answered. When the surrounding Dayo people saw a foreigner dressed in a Dayo official's uniform walking into the arena, they curiously inquired about him and found out that he was the newly appointed Honglu deputy. They continued to watch the show. Lien Baoqing looked at Lien Tong, who had half his body in the ground, and then looked at Xiong Pai's huge body. After being shocked by Xiong Pai's huge strength, his lips trembled for a long time. You actually dare?" "Dare what?" Ren Baqin looked at Lien Baoqing with a smile on his face. Then he lowered his head to look at Lien Baoqing, who was already limp and unconscious. Ren Baqin looked at Lien Baoqing with pity and said, "What a pity. You actually attacked Xiong Pai and got beaten up so badly." TSK. Ren Baqin sighed. "It's quite painful to live like this. Trample him to death and help him to be free." Ren Baqin's words were completely different from what he had said before, and everyone immediately fell silent. Lien Baoqing, Ning Kaichen, and even the people from the Zhang and Hong clans standing at the side felt a chill down their spines. They suddenly felt that this Honglu deputy who looked easy to bully was actually a vicious wolf who would devour people without spitting out the bones. "How dare you? How dare you? I'll kill your entire family." Lien Baoqing jumped up as if his tail had been stepped on and clamored at Ren Baqin. Xiong Pai had a few bloody scars on his body, but he acted as if he didn't feel them. Just by looking at the hideous scars on his body, one could guess that this kind of injury had almost no effect on him. Ren Baqin grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. He lifted his leg and stepped on Lien Baoqing's exposed chest. Gotcha. First, Xiong Pai's bones shattered. Then, like a water bag being stepped on, fresh blood spurted out from his 5 orifices. Ren Baqin suppressed the disgust in his heart and revealed a calm and unruffled smile. He looked at Lien Baoqing and said, "Attacking an official of the Honglu Bureau in Dayo. You guys are really gutsy. Do you think there's no one capable in Dayo?" Seeing Ren Baqin smile, even Lien Baoqing, who had a lawless temperament, felt his heart tremble. Following which, his heart was filled with rage and endless humiliation. That's his normal reaction after being attacked. Lien Baoqing squeezed out these few words from the gaps of his teeth. Ever since he was young, he could do whatever he wanted to do. He had never been humiliated like this before. The rage in his heart was about to ignite his entire body. If it wasn't for Ren Baqin's words that woke him up a little, he would have already gone crazy. Xiong Pai's reaction is also normal. He was stomped to death by your order. Lien Baoqing felt as if his heart was on fire. He felt like he was going to explode in the next moment. There must be a punishment for attacking an official, isn't there? Otherwise, if anyone did this for no reason, where would the dignity of Dayo be? Ren Baqin smiled and walked in front of Lien Baoqing. The surrounding Dayo people all laughed. They felt that this Honlu Bureau deputy who looked like a foreigner was a good person and they liked him very much. This time, I'm here to participate in the birthday celebration of the Dayo Emperor. I brought a gift with me. I'll definitely report your actions to the higher-ups. My great Xia's envoy will also inform your emperor. Lian Baoqing's face was flushed and his eyes were bloodshot. His mind was spinning quickly on how to kill this bastard in front of him. Not only did he have to die but his entire family had to die as well. Ren Baqian touched Lian Baoqing's cheek. This action made the surrounding people feel disgusted. Therefore before that you have to be careful and don't commit any more crimes. Otherwise I'll throw you into prison and the gift you brought will still belong to Her Majesty. However, by then you might not be the one to send it to the emperor. As for the rest you can do whatever you want. Ren Baqian laughed. Ren Baqian's words made Lian Baoqing feel as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him from head to toe. Ren Baqian walked back to the center of the square and said, I don't care how this incident happened today. I hope that all of you and the people who will come after you know that no matter what your status is in your own country or how tyrannical you usually are, you have to remember that this is Dayo. Whether you are a dragon or a tiger you have to crouch down. I don't care if you guys fight to death outside, but don't create trouble for me here. After Ren Baqian finished speaking, the surrounding people were dead silent. Following which, those Dayo people who were watching the commotion cheered loudly. Ren Baqian revealed a smile to the surrounding people. He softened his voice and said gently, everyone here isn't an ordinary person. Treat yourself better. If you want to make things difficult for yourself, don't do it here. Xiongpai, let's go. Ren Baqian snapped his fingers and walked outside. At the same time he didn't forget to shout, Gonggu, let the Public Order Bureau handle this matter. Yes, sir, the burly man called Gonggu quickly replied. This Sir Ren had just been appointed not long ago. They had discussed about him in private and more or less looked down on him. After this incident, he realized that this Sir Ren was much more ruthless than what he looked like on the surface. He really liked the way Ren Baqian handled today. Chapter 83. Ren Baqian left the crowd. After turning a corner, his face started to turn pale and his back started to sweat profusely. He never thought that he would actually do such a thing. Even he was shocked by what he did just now and even felt that it was terrifying. Those words, that behavior, it was completely unlike what he would do. Once he returned to the Honlu Bureau, he immediately rushed to the toilet and retched. Just now, he was beside him and personally gave the order to step on a person like a cockroach. Although he deliberately did not lower his head to look at that scene, the sound was still transmitted to his ears. That final sound somewhat sounded like a persimmon being crushed. Thinking of the scene of the persimmon being crushed, he immediately vomited. After a long time he finally came out of the toilet with a forehead full of sweat. He did not know if what he did today was right. However, he knew that he had to intimidate those people. For example, Lian Baoqing's family had a huge influence in the local area. He had been spoiled since he was young and was used to being tyrannical. If he did not intimidate him, who knew what would happen in the following days? Not only him but the others also felt the same way. Those who came from afar were definitely not ordinary people. Among them there were not many who were kind. Just like that Mr. Emptiness, if not for Xiongpai by his side that day, he would have already gotten into trouble. There were about 13 days left before the Empress's birthday celebration. At this time not many people had arrived. In a few days there would be more people. Who knows, there might be many who had a feud with each other. Even if there was no feud, there might be conflicts because of their different styles. This was the first task that the Empress assigned to him. He absolutely could not mess it up and had to do it well no matter what method he used. Previously, he thought that it would be enough to suppress the other party by reciting poems. Now that he thought about it, he suddenly felt that it was somewhat ridiculous. He had really thought too simply. Perhaps those people had really received more than 10 years of education, but in essence they were not ordinary students. It was hard to say what they would do. At the same time, Ren Baqian also began to think about why the Empress assigned him to do this. After thinking for a long time he still could not figure out the main point. In any case he should just do what that person instructed him to do. Instead of thinking about this, he might as well think about whether the gift he gave the Empress was suitable or not. Not long after Ren Baqian left, the people from the Public Order Bureau arrived. At this moment, more than half of the crowd had already dispersed. Lian Baoqing left with an ashen face after Ren Baqian left. He didn't even bring Lian Baoqing's corpse with him. Of course he still had to stay in Dayo for so many days. He couldn't possibly leave a corpse by his side every day. Coupled with the weather in Dayo, it was estimated that the house would be uninhabitable within 2 days. Although 2 of Mr. Emptiness's subordinates were injured, it was still much better than Lien Baoqing's losing face and his right-hand man. After pacifying the 2 maids, she felt a deep fear of Ren Baqian. The previous probing had made him feel that the Chamberlain of Dependency's deputy was putting on a brave front, but his actions today made him look at him in a different light. He would no longer think that way again. Not only him but the others also felt the same way. Although the people of Dayo were barbaric and overbearing in the past, that was all there was to it. It wasn't like something like today hadn't happened before, but at most they would be whipped a few times after they separated. However, Ren Baqian was different. At that time, the feeling he gave them was that of a wolf that would swallow people whole without spitting out the bones. He was filled with a sinister aura. The reason why they felt this way was because of the contrast between Ren Baqian's usual behavior and his behavior at that time. This kind of contrast made them feel that Ren Baqian was originally this kind of person. That afternoon, the Empress was in the palace looking at a piece of paper that recorded Ren Baqian's actions. And below her was Gu Daxiong, who was known to not care about anything. Interesting. The Empress laughed. Ren Baqian's actions this time made her feel that it was interesting. Even she didn't expect that Ren Baqian would actually do such a thing. It was different from what she originally thought. However, this made her feel that it was very interesting. Gu Daxiong, who was below, heard the Empress's words and laughed. This deputy Ren looks like a weakling, but when he does things he is rather straightforward. Originally, I was a little worried, but now I can wash my hands of this matter. Let him do what he wants, the Empress said indifferently. Yes, Gu Daxiong replied. At the same time, in the residence of Great Xia's envoy in Dayo, Lien Baoqing had a ferocious look on his face. That Honglu deputy with the surname Ren, I want him dead. Is there any way? Sitting opposite Lien Baoqing was a man in his 30s. He had a beard and slightly tanned skin. In fact, before coming to Dayo he wasn't like this. However, after staying in Dayo for a long time, it was fine if he didn't want to be tanned. His name was Gu Zicheng. At this moment he was looking at Lien Baoqing with a smile. Do you think this is Great Xia? It is precisely because this is Dayo that I came to look for you. You can state your conditions, for example helping you return to Great Xia? Lien Baoqing said. Gu Zicheng shook his head slightly. Even though your proposal is very tempting and I have long been sick of this damn place, I still have to say that this is Dayo, not Great Xia. This is the territory of those barbarians. Creating trouble here is tantamount to seeking death. They won't care about your identity. You should have experienced this before. Let me give you a suggestion, swallow your anger first. Lien Baoqing stared intently at Gu Zicheng. After a while he said, then you can stay here until you die. After Lien Baoqing left, a young man in a loose robe with big sleeves walked in from the next room and sat opposite Gu Zicheng. Your Highness. Gu Zicheng bowed his head. No need to be so courteous. The man who was addressed as Your Highness laughed. This generation of the Lien family is really good for nothing. Each of them is worse than the other. He was the 7th prince of Great Xia. No one would have thought that he would leave his attendants and convoy behind and travel lightly to Lan City. Hearing him say this, Gu Zicheng also laughed. The Lien family was also a wealthy and influential family in Great Xia. They had stood tall for hundreds of years and produced talented people in every generation. However, this generation of youngsters was indeed good for nothing. However, I am really interested in this Deputy Ren. The 7th prince smiled. I don't know much either. I have heard that this person was sent to prison more than a month ago. After that, he was brought out to stay in the Beast Park for some time and became the Honglu deputy. Before that, no one knew anything about him. Speaking of which, it is really weird. The 7th prince squinted his eyes slightly. Suddenly, a person like this popped out from a rock. He spoke softly and then laughed. If Ren Baqian saw the 7th prince at this moment, he would definitely be shocked. This was because other than his hairstyle and temperament, the 7th prince's face was exactly the same as his. There was almost no difference, as if they were carved from the same mold. When the 7th prince saw Ren Baqian from afar, he felt this way. Therefore, Ren Baqian's current position in his heart was second only to the purpose of his visit to Dayo. A person who looked exactly like him made him feel a little weird. It was enough to have one person in this world. There was no need for another person who looked exactly like him. Chapter 84. Ren Baqian naturally did not know what was happening in other places. From that day onwards he started to get busy. He could not even care about the air coolers anymore. After Tong Jia made the outer shell, he threw it to caretaker Shi. As for the price, it was 15 taels of silver each. Anyway, the people who bought it weren't ordinary people. It didn't matter if it was expensive. The production method of this thing was too simple. It could only earn a sum of money. As long as it was sold, there would definitely be imitations. Although Dayo people weren't good at doing business, they weren't stupid. They just needed to find someone to make this thing. Almost all the money was under their feet. They would at least know how to bend their backs. Even if Dayo people were really stupid, there were still merchants from other countries. Rinpoche's mind wasn't on this. Although a few hundred taels of silver wasn't a small amount, it wasn't very important to him. What he didn't know was that when caretaker Shi placed this thing in the newly renovated shop on Jingyang Avenue, it immediately attracted the interest of many people, especially after it was demonstrated that it could produce cold air with ice cubes. Out of a total of 20 air coolers, 7 were sold on the first day. The remaining 13 were completely sold the next day. It was much faster than what Rinpoche initially expected. In fact, there was one thing that he didn't know. Ever since the Empress gave the air coolers to the Empress, she often used them even during court sessions. The other officials had long been envious of them. When the air coolers were placed in the shop, they were immediately sold out after being discovered. 20 air coolers earned more than 200 taels of silver. Caretaker Shi's eyes immediately turned red and he hurriedly looked for Rinpoche. Upon hearing this news, Rinpoche was somewhat surprised. He already knew that the air coolers would definitely be sold. However, he didn't expect them to be sold out so quickly. He asked caretaker Shi to go to the previous shop and order another 100 air coolers. He reckoned that they would still be able to catch up with the sales. After leaving the matter to caretaker Shi, Rinpoche continued to deal with the affairs of the Honglu Bureau. As the day of the Empress's birthday approached, more and more people arrived in Lan City. Many of them were originally from families with businesses in Dayo. As their own caravans frequently came and went, they were very accurate with their timing. Usually they would arrive about a week in advance. At this point in time, there were already more than 70 batches of people arriving in Lan City. Most of them came in convoy after convoy. Other than the gifts and people that were to celebrate the Empress's birthday, there were also a large number of goods. The Empress's birthday celebration was in a week's time. Rinpoche reckoned that there would be a lot of people coming during these last few days. After a while, he would be able to get rid of this stall. Rinpoche put down his brush, stretched himself and yawned. These days he was indeed a little busy. After all, things were different from before. Nowadays he had to make decisions on many matters, arrange personnel and even mediate disputes. Just as he had thought, none of the people who could come here were ordinary people, and none of them were kind. They were all used to being domineering in their own homes. What are you looking at? What's wrong with looking at you? What do you think? Cut you up. Charge. Almost 9 out of 10 disputes started with something like this. There were many powerful people in this world and Rinpoche had met a few of them recently. However, all kinds of arrogant and despotic young masters who were originally at home fighting chickens and walking dogs couldn't change their behavior when they came here. Even in China, a place with advanced information technology, there were many of such people, let alone in a feudal society. Basically, they only wandered around within 100 miles of their homes. Even though they had learned a lesson from the mistakes of others, they couldn't care less when they were hot-blooded. These few days Rinpoche hanged 3 people to death. They were hanged alive. Xiongpai wrapped a rope around their necks and lifted them up. The 3 people started to struggle continuously until they finally breathed their last. Such a way of handling things gave many hot-blooded young masters a huge shock. It made them feel like they had seen a ghost when they saw Rinpoche. Rinpoche's methods were really too ruthless, but he still had a good-natured look on his face at all times. Even when he was ordering people to kill, his expression didn't change at all. It was not uncommon for them to kill people, and some of them had even done it with their own hands. However, Rinpoche's behavior still made them feel a chill in their hearts, especially when there was a monster like Xiongpai behind him. After a few times of this, no matter what happened, as long as Rinpoche and Xiongpai stood there, everyone would immediately scatter like birds and beasts. What had happened in the past few days had spread throughout Lan City. Many people knew that the Honglu Bureau had an additional deputy who looked gentle but was actually cruel and merciless. As for those young masters from the other 3 countries, they hated Rinpoche to death and wished they could slice him to death with a knife. They had thought about how they would deal with Rinpoche if he fell into their hands. If it was really as they thought, it would be hard for Rinpoche to die if he fell into their hands. However, they had no choice but to lower their heads now that they were under the eaves. At this moment, these young masters knew that Rinpoche was at least more powerful than them in Lan City. They couldn't help but be convinced. In the past, during the Empress's birthday celebrations, there would always be people who caused a lot of trouble. However, this year there were much fewer. Even the Public Order Bureau was very surprised. In a village on a mountain that was a day's journey away from Lan City, Chiji was carving a puppet with a small knife. Not long after, he heard a commotion at the entrance. A burly man rode a horse into the village and jumped off. He strode toward Chiji and said, "Rascal, you are very carefree here." Chiji immediately laughed and said, "It's much more comfortable than dealing with those bastards. I finally don't have to see those bastards this year. In my opinion, Her Majesty might as well throw me into the army. I will be more comfortable there." "Who asked you to lose that time?" Chiji's face immediately turned black when he heard that burly man's words. "How's the Honglu Bureau? That rascal hasn't been tormented to death by those people, right?" Chiji changed the topic. That burly man's expression immediately became a little strange when he heard this. "What's wrong?" Chiji asked curiously when he saw his expression. That bunch of fellows are like mice seeing a cat when they see that rascal now." Chiji's curiosity was immediately piqued when he heard this. "What's going on? When I was around, those bastards never behaved themselves. They gave me trouble every day and couldn't wait to strangle each and every one of them to death." That burly man laughed and told him some of the things he knew. "Those bastards are all scared to death. Every one of them is scared to death when they see him. As long as he stands there, they don't even need to say a word. No matter what dispute there is, they will just turn around and leave." Chiji touched his short stubble and scolded, "Damn it, I broke 4 people's legs last year, but that bunch of fellows didn't even take it seriously. They really think that I am easy to bully. Next year, if there is any more trouble, I will just kill them. If not for the fact that they were gifts to Her Majesty, do you think I won't kill them?" That burly man laughed again and then shook his head. "You can't scare them. You are just a little unreasonable and tyrannical and you kill people cleanly. But that rascal is different. He is like a snake. I didn't see it live, but I heard them say that the rascal had a smile on his face and asked Xiong Pai to put a rope around the necks of the people and hang them to death. He just used a big knife to chop them. There is nothing scary about that. He's smiling at you, asking about your well-being and stabbing you with a knife. That's how scary it is." Chiji threw the knife in his hand forward and stabbed it into a wooden board. He seemed to feel aggrieved that he was actually not as good as that weak rascal. "Damn it, I originally thought that the rascal would be tortured badly and wondered why Her Majesty didn't send someone more powerful. I didn't expect him to be so powerful." Chiji scolded and then slapped the burly man's leg. "But who did you learn this from?" "The people from the Qin nation said it. I learned it from them," the burly man said with a smile. Chapter 85. When it was almost night time, Renbachien was summoned to the palace. Once he entered the palace, he saw the empress dressed in red muslin standing in front of a table. On top of the table was a painting. "Greetings, Your Majesty," Renbachien greeted. The empress turned around and sized up Renbachien. Then she nodded her head and said, "I haven't seen you for a few days. You look more like you now. Since I am working for Her Majesty, I have to look presentable. Otherwise, I will embarrass Her Majesty," Renbachien said. "Well said and well done," the empress praised. "As long as Your Majesty doesn't blame me for acting rashly. If you were afraid, you would have come to beg for forgiveness long ago." The empress curled her lips. "These days, I have been wholeheartedly thinking about completing the task Your Majesty has given me. How could I care about anything else? Even if Your Majesty really wants to blame me, I have to settle the matter first," Renbachien quickly said. Once again, the empress shifted her gaze from the painting to Renbachien. "If you are telling the truth, I will be very happy." "Of course it's the truth. I don't dare to hide anything from His Majesty. I will speak my mind." The empress was non-committal. She would be a fool if she believed everything that Renbachien said. Renbachien was naturally aware of this. However, no matter how many times he tried to flatter someone, flattering them more and showing his loyalty would always bring him a lot of benefits. It was just a few words, nothing more. He felt that if he had been as smart and quick-witted as he was now, he wouldn't have been so miserable. The empress turned around and returned to her couch. She stretched out her palm, and Hong Yuan immediately poured a cup of wine and placed it in her hand. This wasn't the first time Renbachien had seen such a scene. He had always been curious about how Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan knew when the empress wanted something. Furthermore, looking at the empress's expression, their every move was exactly what she wanted. "It can't be a roundworm in my stomach, right?" However, this ability was what he was striving for. "Although no one has reported you these 2 days, they will probably come when the time comes. What do you think I should do? Although you did a good job, they were all gifts for me. If I let them go out with a belly full of complaints, it would be inexcusable. But we don't want to punish you. After all, you're working for us and what you're doing is to our liking. Tell me, what should I do? When Rinpoche heard what the empress said, his mind spun. There seemed to be only one path in front of him. Admit your guilt and accept the punishment. Even though the empress wouldn't really punish him and was just saying it to test his thoughts, Rinpoche knew that the empress wouldn't punish him. If she were to be punished, the empress would lose face. He worked for her, but in the end he had to take the blame. When had the emperor of Dao ever done such a thing? Dao had always given people the impression of being rude and overbearing. He had never cared about what others thought. Rinpoche raised his head and said to the empress, "With your majesty's dignity, why would you care about the opinions of others, let alone those thieves and rascals? Will his majesty give them an explanation?" After hearing Rinpoche's reply, the empress revealed a smile on her face. Soon after, she burst into unbridled laughter. Her red lips were on fire. At this moment, the feeling that the empress gave him was like a ball of flame, unbridled and flamboyant. Hong Yuan, give storyteller Rin a glass of wine. Rinpoche gulped down the wine in her cup and laughed heartily. Rinpoche took the wine cup. Just by smelling it, he knew that it was strong wine. He raised the cup with both hands and said, "Thank you for the wine, your majesty." After finishing his sentence, he drank the wine in one gulp. A scorching heat flowed into his stomach. Well said. Why would I care about the opinions of others when I do things? The empress praised. Your majesty is well versed in both literature and martial arts. No matter what you do, you have your own limits. Naturally, you don't need to care about what others think or say. Rinpoche knew that his words had touched the empress's heart. He immediately struck while the iron was hot. After the empress laughed out loud, she raised another cup of wine and poured it into her mouth. There are 4 more days before the great hunt. Inform them that they can bring along a follower. Report the name list in 2 days. Rinpoche was slightly stunned. Great hunt? He had never heard of this before. When the time comes, you have to perform well and don't embarrass me. All right, you can leave now. Yes, your majesty. Rinpoche pondered as he left the palace. What was going on with this great hunt? Furthermore, Her Majesty wanted him to participate. It seemed like he had to find someone to ask. After returning to the beast park, Rinpoche immediately went to look for Caretaker Shur. He saw Caretaker Shur holding a stone padlock at the entrance of the house and moving it up and down. No wonder Caretaker Shur had muscles all over his body. Rinpoche usually did not pay attention to them. Caretaker Shur was also training his muscles every day. Sure enough, muscles were trained, not nurtured. When Caretaker Shur saw Rinpoche, he threw the stone padlock to the side and laughed. I'm getting old, but I'm not as strong as before. If it was 10 years ago, I wouldn't even need to exert any strength to do this. At this moment, Caretaker Shur was sweating profusely and panting a little. Sometimes, when Rinpoche looked at these aboriginals, he felt that it was time for him to train. However, after thinking about it, even if he became a muscle maniac, he wouldn't be able to withstand a slap. If there was an opportunity, it would be better to get some martial arts manuals from this world. At least he wouldn't be too weak to fight a chicken. How's the matter with the air cooler? Rinpoche asked. We have produced 30 air coolers in the past few days and sold more than 20 of them. The remaining ones will probably be sold tomorrow. Caretaker Shur was excited when he mentioned this. Rinpoche nodded his head. He estimated that it was about time. A total of more than 40 air coolers had been sold. There should be imitations soon. However, with so many young masters coming over recently, if they knew about this air cooler, they would not be stingy to buy one. It should be able to sell for a while. This air cooler should be able to earn at least 1,000 taels of silver. Caretaker Shur, I have something to ask. What's the great hunt? Rinpoche changed the topic to the autumn hunt. It's almost time. Caretaker Shur immediately replied after hearing Rinpoche's question. It's a custom. Every year on this day, people would carry a bow and knife and go hunting in the mountains. The more prey they have, the better their lives will be in the coming year. Furthermore, if they manage to hunt prey like the sharp-toothed tiger, they will be favored by the ladies back in the stronghold. It's also held in Lan City? It's mainly held in the stronghold. However, Her Majesty will hold it once every year. The children of various influential families will participate in it to display their individual strength. Some who have grudges will also compete with each other during this time. In previous years' Great Hunt, did those who came to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday also participate? Of course. The youngsters of the Aboriginals are not as weak as them. We have to make them understand this point, Caretaker Sure replied as a matter of course. Rinpoche was enlightened. It turned out that the purpose of displaying one's strength was to let other nations see how brave the youngsters of Dayo were. This way they would naturally feel a sense of fear in their hearts. When they returned and told others, their reputation would naturally spread. Soon after, Rinpoche's face turned green. Chapter 86. After inquiring about the great hunt from Caretaker Sure, Rinpoche had a rough idea of what to do. The autumn hunt was originally a custom of the Aboriginals. Now that the city was built, many commoners did not have such conditions. However, it was still held once a year. Those who participated were the sons and daughters of the court officials. They were able to show off their strength in front of the Empress. The Empress could also observe whether there were outstanding youths from various families through the autumn hunt. At the same time, the Empress would always invite the envoys from various countries to participate in the autumn hunt to let them see the strength of the Aboriginals' youths. After that, the news would naturally spread back to the various countries. This had already become a routine. After the Empress came to power, in addition to inviting the envoys from various countries, she would also invite the youths from various countries who came to send gifts to participate. This was also a form of deterrence and display of strength because many of these youths would be in power in the future. It gave them a direct impression of the valiant strength of the Aboriginals and also spread the news through their mouths. The hunting location was a forest that was half a day's journey away from Lon City. There were many wild beasts there and many of them were even more ferocious. This was a stage for everyone to display their abilities. Almost every year, the person with the best results would receive more attention and a better path to promotion. At the same time, their performance during the hunt would also attract the attention of many young ladies. As a result, everyone who participated in the hunt was full of energy. However, Rinpoche's mind was filled with bad thoughts. According to Caretaker Sure, hunting on the mountain wasn't for hunting rabbits. Instead, it was for the individual. If he went, he would not know how to use knives, spears, rods, bows and arrows. Not to mention hunting, it would be good if he did not get beaten up by the prey. Those young masters had servants, but he didn't. Furthermore, it was a rabbit. If it was a rabbit with a mouth full of fangs like those in the Beast Park, Rinpoche felt that he would not be able to defeat it. Wasn't it making things difficult for him to hunt with those humanoid Gundams who demolished houses with their bare hands? The matter of the beast wasn't what Rinpoche was most worried about. Instead, he was most worried about the humans. These days he had offended many people in the Honglu Bureau. Initially he thought that they couldn't do anything to him. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. If someone were to plot against him on the mountain, he would probably have to pay for his 50 kilograms of meat before he even encountered the beast. This was simply a scam. After thinking about it, Rinpoche cursed, "Damn it." If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have been so ruthless. Now, there were more than one or two people who wanted to chew his bones and swallow them. Since they had already come this far, there was no point in thinking too much. Unless, when the time came, he would hug the Empress's thigh and become her pendant. He would rather die than go up the mountain even though he really wanted to do that. Needless to say, he had to go back and get a gun. Even if he brought 2 guns for self-defense, he might not be safe. But without a gun to defend himself, he was definitely not safe. Not only could a gun be used to deal with ferocious beasts, but it could also be used to deal with people. Calculating the time, he had to return to Earth tomorrow night. It seemed that he had to settle the matter of notifying the young masters of the other 3 nations and submit the name list. If someone else came after he left, he would let someone else handle it. The Empress would definitely understand. One day after the Great Hunt, he would return to Earth. When he returned, it would be just in time to attend the Empress's birthday celebration. Early the next morning, Rinpoche arrived at the Honglu Bureau to arrange for someone to inform them about the Great Hunt. Not long after he sat down, someone came to report that someone of high status had arrived. It was the 7th Prince of Great Xia. Currently, Great Xia was the most powerful nation that Rinpoche knew of. Whether in terms of land area or population, its land area was 3 times that of Dayo's. Its population was even more. It had more than 200 million people, which was close to 3 times the population. In a feudal world, this was already rather terrifying. With a large population, there were also many experts. It was said that 6 of the top 10 experts in the world were in Great Xia. Furthermore, Great Xia had a long history of culture. Every nation was deeply influenced by Great Xia. Especially the Yun nation and the Qin nation, which were originally of the same origin as Great Xia, they were even more affected. In various senses, Great Xia was currently the hegemon of this world that Rinpoche knew of. With the arrival of the seventh prince of such a nation, Rinpoche really couldn't neglect him. He hurriedly brought Xiong Pai out. There was a large group of people and horses outside the door. Hundreds of armored and murderous knights were standing in front of the Honglu temple. Behind these knights was a large luxurious carriage. 6 extremely tall horses were pulling the carriage. They were half a head taller than the other horses. Their entire bodies were covered with satin-like fur and looked extremely spirited. Just by looking at these 6 horses, one could tell that they were definitely priceless. If any of them were to be placed in the hands of others, they would probably be treated as treasures. However, at this moment they were being used to pull the carriage. Inevitably, one couldn't help but feel that it was a waste of God's gifts. Rinpoche stood in front of the Honglu temple and didn't continue to walk forward. The other party was the 7th prince of Great Xia, but he was an official of Dayo. Coming out to welcome him was already sufficient etiquette. In fact, other than the people who came out to take a look at the beginning, the people who arrived later on were directly brought into the Honglu temple. As such, Rinpoche felt that standing in front of the door to welcome him was already sufficient. There was no need to eagerly run to the front to welcome him. After all, he wouldn't be paid by Dayo. However, what made him feel strange was that these knights looked at him strangely. Although it seemed that their strict discipline allowed them to control themselves, the shocked expressions on their faces couldn't be concealed at all. Why are they looking at me? Because I'm handsome? I'm not that handsome to such a tragic extent, right? Rinpoche touched his face. He couldn't figure out what was going on with those people's gazes. He could only pretend that he didn't see them and continued to wait at the door. After standing in front of the door for 2 minutes, Rinpoche was getting more and more impatient. Just as he was considering whether to turn around and go back, a man on a horse ran to the front and gave the order. Soon after, hundreds of knights started to move forward slowly. The carriage got closer and closer to Rinpoche until it stopped in front of the door. Just now, from afar, he already felt that this carriage looked extremely luxurious. When it was right in front of him and he saw the gold inlaid patterns and inlaid gems, Rinpoche really wanted to find a camera and take a picture of this carriage. What was a luxurious carriage? This was it. The body of the carriage was built with an unknown purple wood. Mountains, rivers, and clouds were first carved on it. Then a pattern of flying cranes was inlaid with gold. It was vivid and lifelike. The eyes and crown of the cranes were inlaid with gems. As the light flowed, they were filled with spirituality. It was as if they could fly out from the walls of the carriage in the next second. This carriage looked more like an exquisite piece of art than a means of transportation. As the carriage stopped, a pair of hands reached out from inside the carriage. The curtains were pulled open and the first person to come out was a stunning lady dressed in pink. Following her was a young man dressed in a white robe and a white jade crown on his head. When Rinpoche saw this young man's face, he was stunned. It was as if he was looking at himself in the mirror. His facial features were exactly the same. It was as if they were carved from the same mold. Rinpoche had never thought that there would actually be such a person in the world who looked exactly like him. Moreover, he was the 7th prince of Great Xia. Chapter 87. Rinpoche didn't know why he had such an impulse, but this feeling came from the bottom of his heart. It was as if it was the deepest desire and impulse in his heart. If he killed this person who looked exactly like him, then he would be the only one left. Rinpoche didn't know if the other party had the same thoughts as him. He suppressed the killing intent in his heart, cupped his fists and asked, "Are you the 7th prince of Great Xia?" Rinpoche didn't dare to reveal even the slightest bit of killing intent in his heart. It was too easy for such a person to kill him. "That's me." The 7th prince suppressed the killing intent in his heart and showed an appropriate expression of surprise before nodding slowly. At this moment, the two of them had a murderous intent towards each other, but they concealed it very well. The only difference was that this was the second time the 7th prince had seen Rinpoche. 7th prince walked in front of Rinpoche and faced him. Everyone in the surroundings looked at the two of them in a daze. Who would have thought that there would be two people so similar in this world? More than one person suspected that the 7th prince had a twin brother. However, after thinking about it, he felt that it was unlikely that such a thing would happen. "I really feel that I'm looking at myself," the 7th prince exclaimed softly after sizing up Rinpoche. "This world is really mysterious. Xiaowu, don't you agree?" The 7th prince's words were directed at the beautiful woman. The woman came to the 7th prince's side and looked at the two of them. She gently covered her mouth and appropriately revealed a shocked expression. Rinpoche pursed his lips and didn't say anything. He also felt that it was very mystical that there was actually someone different from him in another world. In the future, you and I should get to know each other better. The seventh prince patted Rinpoche's shoulder and seemed to be very happy. However, Rinpoche didn't believe this nonsense. One would be a fool to believe him. If he was the seventh prince and saw someone who looked exactly like him, he would only have two thoughts. One was to kill him, and the other was to keep him by his side as a substitute so that he could use him as a shield at a critical moment. He was now an official of Dayo. Not to mention his position as the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall, he was still a secondary class, rank 6 Honglu deputy. The second option was very difficult to achieve, so there was only one option left, and that was to kill him. This was what Rinpoche understood at this moment. Back then, he was able to have such an impulse in his heart, so how could a person of his status tolerate someone who looked exactly like him living in the outside world? Very soon Rinpoche laughed and said, "I didn't expect that I would actually look like the Prince of Great Xia. This world is really magical. Perhaps in some corner of this world, there are people who look exactly the same." The seventh prince narrowed his eyes slightly. If someone else had said this in the past, he wouldn't have believed it. But now he believed it. "Your Highness, please follow me." Although His Highness should be addressed as such, right? Although Your Highness has a distinguished status, there are still some procedures that must be followed, Rinpoche said as he walked in. When everyone went in, the people outside were still in disbelief. Qi Heng and Qi Sheng also smacked their lips in surprise. They didn't expect such a coincidence to happen. He could brag about this when he got back. The seventh prince's subordinates were even more surprised than the two of them. Following the seventh prince, the woman called Xiao Wu and a person who looked like the commander of the cavalry followed. On the way into the courtyard, the seventh prince was still marveling at the wonders of this world. He casually asked, "Where is Deputy Ren's ancestral home? Maybe it's also Great Xia, or maybe it's a descendant of the royal family. Otherwise, it's really hard for me to imagine that there's anyone in this world who doesn't have any blood relations with me." When Rinpoche heard this, he thought to himself that if he wasn't from Earth, he might really believe it. But he said, "I'm not worthy to be associated with you. My ancestors were commoners in the marketplace and didn't even have an official." The seventh prince turned his head to look at Rinpoche and then turned his head away as if nothing had happened. Xiao Wu, who was beside him, frowned. Just now, the seventh prince grabbed her hand very forcefully and it hurt her a little. But very quickly, she intimately held onto the seventh prince's hand and transmitted the warmth of her palm to him. Looking at Xiao Wu bending over the table and filling out a piece of paper, Rinpoche recalled the empress's instructions and said, "The annual Great Hunt will be held in a few days. I wonder if the seventh prince is interested? I really want to see the young generation of Dayo." The seventh prince laughed. "But before that, I would like to request Deputy to pass on the message that I would like to meet the empress of your country." Rinpoche nodded his head. "I will report to Her Majesty. I don't know if Her Majesty will meet me. In addition, there will be someone to inform Your Highness about the time and location of the Great Hunt." The seventh prince nodded his head. "Deputy Rin, if you have time, I would like to have a drink with you. I hope you won't decline." Rinpoche laughed. "Recently I've been rather busy and I can't leave. If there's a chance in the future, I will definitely pay you a visit." Seeing that Rinpoche rejected him, the seventh prince didn't say anything else. After Xiao Wu finished filling out the paper, he brought his men and left. Rinpoche didn't send him off. After the seventh prince left, he sat down on the chair and panted heavily. Just now, he simply couldn't suppress the murderous intent in his heart. He even had the urge to let Xiong Pai pinch him to death. However, he didn't dare to do so. He didn't know if Xiong Pai would die, but he knew that he was definitely going to die. Furthermore, he wouldn't believe that the Prince of Great Xia didn't have a few experts by his side. At this moment, Xiong Pai had a blank look on his face. "Deputy, he looks so much like you. If we were outside, I definitely wouldn't be able to recognize you." Rinpoche ignored him. Not to mention Xiong Pai, even he himself wouldn't be able to recognize him. After the seventh prince left, the boiling murderous intent in his heart finally calmed down. Even he himself felt strange as to why he would have such a reaction when he saw the seventh prince. Before he came to this world, he didn't even kill a chicken. Although he had let Xiong Pai kill a few people these days, it was all for the purpose of intimidating others. He didn't feel comfortable in his heart. And this was the first time he had such a murderous intent toward a stranger. After sitting behind the table in a daze for a while, Rinpoche suddenly thought of a movie that he had watched before. There were countless versions of himself in countless parallel worlds, and every version of himself had different encounters. He always felt that this seventh prince was a different version of himself in a different world. Under some kind of coincidence, he came to this world and met the version of himself in this world. Although this idea wasn't reliable, he felt that it wasn't impossible. Otherwise, he couldn't explain the murderous intent in his heart just now. In the movie, every time he killed himself, he would become stronger. According to Rinpoche's understanding, the same origin would be divided into countless parts. After killing the version of himself in another world, he would obtain the origin of the other party and become stronger. Of course, this was just a delusion in the movie world. Chapter 88. What would happen if the seventh prince really died? Was there such a thing as an origin in this world? Would he absorb his origin? Was he really the Rinpoche from another world? When these thoughts appeared in Rinpoche's mind, it was as if he was holding a Pandora's box in his hand, constantly tempting him. However, he didn't dare to do so. Even those who were trampled or hanged to death by his order were the trusted aides or stewards of those young masters. Although he appeared to be ruthless, he knew what he could do and what he couldn't. With the identity of the seventh prince, he really didn't dare to do so. If he died here, it would be like a president of a big country dying in China. The impact would be too great. It would be like slapping the face of the great Xia imperial family and spitting on them. The other party didn't need any evidence. As long as there was a little doubt, they could send someone to kill him. Not to mention whether the empress would protect him, even if she wanted to, unless he never left the palace, the other party could just send an expert. Rinpoche rubbed his forehead and suppressed this thought. He had to settle the matter that the empress had instructed him to do. It was better to keep the matter of the seventh prince at the bottom of his heart. However, Rinpoche raised his vigilance. If he had such an impulse, what about the other party? Would he be the same as him? If the other party had such thoughts, given his identity, he wouldn't have to worry about this and that. Then he would be in danger. That afternoon, all the people who had arrived to participate in the great hunt had been counted. Everyone was going to participate. Unlike Rinpoche, the others already knew about the great hunt. They had rushed to Lan City before the great hunt and naturally had the intention to participate. In any case, each of them could bring an attendant. After all, the people from other countries weren't as skilled as the aboriginals. Even if those heirs were skilled in martial arts, they still needed a helper who could help them carry their prey. This was the difference between them and Rinpoche. Although Rinpoche wasn't an aboriginal, he didn't have such preferential treatment. While counting the number of people, Rinpoche put aside his thoughts and went to look for Gu Daxiong. After all, he needed a mount to go hunting. Not to mention riding a horse, Rinpoche hadn't even touched one before. Even if it was a last-minute effort, he had to think of a way. Gu Daxiong was snoring in his room when he was woken up by Rinpoche. He scolded Rinpoche discontentedly. After hearing the purpose of Rinpoche's visit, he laughed and said, "You can take away the ones you like in the backyard." "Thank you very much, Sir Gu." Rinpoche cupped his hands in thanks and went straight to the backyard. Generally speaking, people in ancient times would refer to a cow pen or a horse pen. However, Gu Daxiong only referred to a pen. After Rinpoche went over and took a look, he understood why. The only thing missing was a horse. Speaking of which, there were relatively few horses in Dayo. Most of them were cattle and sheep. It was the same in this enclosure. There were a few sheep, the kind that pulled carts on the streets. They were huge and about the same size as horses. There were also a few cows that looked more docile and they had curved and spiral horns. It was unknown what the difference was. The spiral horn cows were greenish in color, and their bodies were thinner. In addition, there were two giant birds not far away. Their feathers were yellowish-brown. They looked a little like ostriches, but their heads were much bigger than ostriches. Their beaks were wider and their necks were thicker. There was a faint stench on their bodies. Even though it wasn't very strong, it was very disgusting. Rinpoche couldn't help but cover his nose. Are these things used to be ridden? Rinpoche curiously asked the person in charge. Sir, these are mountain-gazing birds. They run extremely fast, especially when crossing mountains and rivers. They are much faster than other animals. They are usually used to deliver letters, the person in charge of these animals immediately said. Rinpoche curiously looked at the two mountain-gazing birds a few more times before asking, "What kind of mount is better for me to ride when I go hunting? It must be docile and easy to control." The first is the mountain-gazing bird. It can be ridden on mountains and can jump up rocks that aren't tall. The second is the crooked cow. It's fast and can carry things, but it's not as convenient as the mountain-gazing bird, the person in charge said. Rinpoche followed the direction of his finger and looked at the two crooked cows with spiral-shaped horns. Then he looked at the mountain birds. He preferred crooked cows as their backs were wider, making them more comfortable to ride on. Furthermore, they could carry things. Although the mountain-gazing bird could run and jump in the mountains, according to caretaker Sher, there were many ferocious beasts in the mountains. If they were to encounter ferocious beasts while riding on this bird, they might not be able to react in time. It would be safer for him to walk slowly on his own two legs. It wasn't that the crooked cow couldn't climb the mountain, but it wasn't as easy as the mountain-gazing bird. The main problem was the mountain-gazing bird's stench. If he kept riding it, it would be a torture. "Bring this crooked cow out for me to try," Rinpoche said. "All right." The person in charge opened the wooden fence and pulled out a crooked cow. Then he took a saddle from the side and put it on. After that, he held the rope and said to Rinpoche, "Sir, please." The crooked cow's back was about 1.3 meters above the ground. Rinpoche took a deep breath, grabbed the saddle and climbed up. This crooked cow was rather well behaved and didn't move at all when Rinpoche was crawling on the net. After Rinpoche was seated properly, the person in charge passed the rope to him and told him how to operate it. "Go." Rinpoche's calf knocked on the cow's stomach, and the cow immediately moved forward. The reins were attached to the cow's face and it was similar to a horse's. The way to control it was similar as well. In addition, the crooked cow was docile, so it was easy to control. However, once the crooked cow started to run, Rinpoche had to protect its body for fear that it would fall. Not long after, Rinpoche started to feel uncomfortable all over his body. The speed of this crooked cow wasn't considered slow, but it was too bumpy. Furthermore, it was swaying left and right, making Rinpoche feel motion sickness. Rinpoche hurriedly stopped the crooked cow and jumped onto the ground to rest. "Is this the most stable one?" Rinpoche asked. "The mountain-gazing bird is more stable than the crooked cow. Sir, you can give it a try." Seeing this, Rinpoche had no choice but to let the person in charge bring out the mountain-gazing bird. The mountain-gazing bird was also very docile, or it could be said that it had been tamed. Rinpoche stroked its feathers first. The mountain-gazing bird let out a gee sound and turned its head to look at Rinpoche. "Sir, you can stroke its head first." "It likes to do that," the person in charge said. Rinpoche placed his hand on the mountain-gazing bird's head and it let out a gee sound again. At the same time, its eyes squinted slightly. It looked very comfortable, no different from a cat or dog that was begging to be stroked. After he climbed onto the back of the mountain-gazing bird and ran for a while, he realized that even though this thing didn't look very eye-catching, it was indeed much more comfortable than riding the crooked cow. The feathers on its body were also softer, and it didn't chafe the inner thighs. The only drawback was the faint stench that kept drilling into his nose. "Are all these things so smelly?" Rinpoche asked. "Yes, this thing relies on its stench to make other wild beasts not like to treat it as prey," the person in charge said. Rinpoche furrowed his eyebrows for a long time. Alright, this thing was a little smelly, but it was indeed comfortable to ride. If he were to ride the crooked cow, he reckoned that he would collapse before he even reached his destination. If it was a little smelly, so be it. He would bear with it. At most, he would bring 2 bottles of perfume and spray it on when he returned from Earth. Chapter 89. Rinpoche opened his eyes, looked at the familiar roof, and stared blankly for a long time. In the novels, one would never come back after transmigrating, or one could wear whatever they wanted. Going through this torment every few days really gave him a headache. He was lucky this time that the Empress's birthday celebration and the Great Hunt happened to coincide with his time in that world. However, he couldn't be so lucky every time. It would be troublesome if he happened to return to Earth for some important matter. He really wished that he could control his transmigration back and forth. That would be much safer. After thinking about it, Rinpoche felt that he should install a camera. Since he couldn't find the reason for his transmigration from his body, he would record it to see how he transmigrated. Perhaps he could find some clues. He sat up from his bed and opened the window. It was even colder outside and a gust of cold air hit him in the face. There was some snow outside the windowsill. It seemed that it had just snowed, probably last night. It was already November. It had been more than 4 months since he arrived in that world. However, only 2 months had passed in Rinpoche's body, and this was when the time on Earth and in the other world were added together. Rinpoche felt that if this continued, his lifespan would follow his body's time. Others had lived for 10 years, but his body had only lived for 5 years. However, in that world, others had lived for 4 years, but his body had lived for 6 years. In a short period of time, there wasn't much of a difference, but as time passed, it would gradually become apparent. He wandered between 2 worlds, but he was different from the people in both worlds. This was the biggest problem with time not synchronizing. However, this was only a guess. It would probably take a long time for him to verify whether this guess was true or not. Now it was time to prepare the things that he needed. This great hunt was a huge trap for him. If he didn't handle it well, he might not have a future. If the 7th prince had the same thoughts when he saw Rinpoche, he wouldn't have as many misgivings as Rinpoche. There were also those sons of nobles who couldn't wait to eat him alive. In addition, there were all kinds of ferocious beasts in the mountain range. Rinpoche felt that to others, this was just a stage for them to showcase themselves, have fun, or observe others. To him, however, it was a huge trap where he could lose his life at any time. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that he was being overly sensitive. If there were aboriginals around, no one would dare to make a move on him. However, he didn't know much about the Great Hunt. It was better for him to be fully prepared. It would be best if he could get closer to some of the aboriginals in the future. This way he would be safer. However, the Empress wouldn't be able to keep her promise to not embarrass herself. However, Rinpoche felt that his life was more important. If he had a choice, he would rather hug the Empress's thigh than go up the mountain. He just didn't know if the Empress would kick him up the mountain. At the very least, she told him not to embarrass himself. She definitely didn't want him to hug her thigh at the foot of the mountain. First, he searched the internet for the things he needed and confirmed what he wanted. First was a crossbow. This thing was perfect for hunting in the mountains. Moreover, it was silent, so it wouldn't attract other people. The crossbow might not be as powerful as some bows and arrows, but even if he was given a composite bow, he still wouldn't be able to hit it. There were still 3 days left, and Rinpoche didn't think that he could master archery in such a short period of time. Next was the gun, which was one of the most common killing weapons in modern times. It was also more powerful than a crossbow. Rinpoche prepared to get one for self-defense. If possible, Rinpoche also wanted to get 2 grenades or something. If he really met with an accident, he could throw these grenades at the other party. Even if they didn't kill him, they could still injure him. At the very least, they could scare him and make it easier for him to escape. These were the main things he needed. There were still some other miscellaneous things. According to what Rinpoche knew, they still had to camp for the night. There would always be some small things that could be used. For example, sleeping bags, various seasoning boxes, and a military knife. Rinpoche didn't have the means to buy guns and crossbows. Even though there was a phone number for selling guns written on the door of the toilet at the bus terminal, it was written so openly that the police would think that they were blind. Rinpoche still felt that it wasn't reliable. If he was lucky, they would sell him a BB gun. If he was unlucky, they would sell him a water gun. These were all tricks. It was better not to find trouble for himself. He was afraid that he would have to look for Ching for these things. In any case, he was a young master. Rinpoche believed that he would definitely be able to find someone to get them. Rinpoche heated up a bag of milk in the fridge with the microwave and ate his breakfast with biscuits. Then he picked up his phone and gave Ching a call. "I say, did something happen to you recently? I couldn't find you." "Sure enough, men become bad when they get rich. Are you afraid that I will disturb you?" Hearing Ching's voice, Rinpoche laughed. He was intentionally distancing himself from Ching, and Ching must have felt it. He had no choice. He was afraid that Ching would find out about his secret. After all, his disappearance and reappearance were too regular. It would always make people feel that something was wrong. "Is that why you are so bad?" Rinpoche laughed. "That was in the past. I have turned over a new leaf now," Ching immediately said. "Are you free in the afternoon? Let's have a meal together?" "Sure, send me the address." "Jiangnan was talking about you yesterday," Ching immediately said. "All right, you go ahead with your work." Rinpoche hung up the phone and noticed that he had received a few messages. He opened them and saw that one was sent by an unknown number 2 days ago. "This isn't Fei. I'm getting my salary from my new job. When are you free? I will treat you to a meal as a form of gratitude. And Fei? Ren Baqian's first reaction was that he had sent the message to the wrong person. Then he suddenly thought of the girl who was wearing a hearing aid but was very confident in finding a job. He closed the message and looked at his WeChat. Dong Haiqing had sent him a message. Young Master Ren, it seems like you don't like your old classmate anymore. A strong sense of resentment and dissatisfaction was transmitted through the screen of the phone. Below her was a message from Qin Bing. I haven't been able to contact you since the gathering. Did something happen? Ren Baqian shook his head. Let them think whatever they want. At that time he had just entered the other world and was still in the mood to contact his old classmate. However, after such a long time, Ren Baqian always felt that the other world was the main world. He didn't care about many things on Earth anymore. Of course, this was also because Ren Baqian's thoughts were always on how to preserve his life and climb up. After a long time, it seemed that the other world was the important one. On Earth, as long as one had money, one wouldn't starve to death. There was nothing to worry about. Ren Baqian continued to scroll through WeChat. His parents were still posting things like the way to maintain good health, the secret to longevity, and the 10 things that everyone should know. He placed his phone back on the table and surfed the internet for a while. Then he changed his clothes and drove to the city center to find a store that sold surveillance equipment. He bought a set of equipment and arranged to install it in the afternoon. After that, he found a nearby barber shop that looked well renovated and was ready to get his hair cut. However, when he entered the shop, he saw a girl wearing a red device on her ear. She was washing someone's hair. Can it be such a coincidence? Ren Baqian laughed. He didn't even think of replying to her message. Previously he had helped her out because he had nothing better to do. He thought that he wouldn't have the chance to meet her again. After all, in a city with a population of millions, the chances of meeting each other were very small. Many people wouldn't even meet each other in their lifetime, let alone in his situation. He didn't expect to meet Fei at a random barber shop. He didn't know if this world was too coincidental or if it was fated. Chapter 90. And Fei washed the guest's hair and wrapped a towel around it. When she raised her head, she saw Rinpoche standing beside her. She was so surprised that she opened her mouth and let out an ah sound. New job? Rinpoche smiled and asked. Yes. And Faye's lips opened and closed as she spat out a word. She seemed to have a hard time as she preferred to write on a piece of paper. I saw your message. I will send you a message when I'm free, Rinpoche said. I still have to trouble you for a haircut. And Faye nodded her head immediately. It seemed that it was easier to say the word ah than other sounds. Rinpoche lowered his head and allowed Faye to apply shampoo and scrub his hair. And Faye's hands were very soft and she was very attentive when she was washing his hair. After that, Rinpoche sat on a chair and asked the hairdresser to shave his hair flat. He left a short stubble on his head and it looked like he had just come out of a prison cell. It was probably because it was too hot. The people of Dayo did not think that their bodies, hair, and skin were inherited by their parents. Everyone's head was clean and bald was also a common hairstyle. For example, Xiongpai was bald. This made Rinpoche equate being bald with being strong. How could one become strong if he was not bald? It was a pity that he could not become strong even if he was bald. Before leaving, Rinpoche even bid farewell to Nfei before leaving. Half an hour later, Rinpoche sat in a restaurant opposite Chin. He did not look much different from before. Rinpoche, on the other hand, had changed a lot. Most importantly, he had put on a lot of weight and his temperament had become more mature. After all, there was always the risk of losing one's life in that world. It was hard not to be calm. Is there anything you need from me? Chin sat down and stared at Rinpoche for a long time before suddenly asking. It was not strange for Rinpoche to look for him for a meal. Even though he was not a very proactive person, it was normal for him to look for an old friend after not showing his face for a long time. However, Rinpoche did not look for him for lunch often. It was usually at night. Even though there were no additional programs, everyone was usually very busy at noon. On the contrary, having a meal at night was more leisurely and carefree. Indeed, there is something. Help me buy some things. Rinpoche nodded his head and said. What things? For you to ask me to buy something for you, it's definitely not something ordinary. Don't tell me it's firearms? Chin was obviously joking. He knew Rinpoche too well. As long as Rinpoche wasn't tricked, he definitely wouldn't touch these things. Then it must be some other troublesome things or some contraband. To him it was not a problem at all. However, what Rinpoche said next stunned him. I want firearms, pistols, military crossbows and grenades, Rinpoche replied calmly. Chin looked at Rinpoche as if he did not know him. He lowered his voice and asked, What are you trying to do? You have a bright future ahead of you, so don't be impulsive. No matter what it is, I can help you think of a solution. Instead of using the power of the government, you chose to use those underhanded methods. Are you crazy? Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You are thinking too much. Do I look like that kind of person? Upon hearing Rinpoche's words, Chin heaved a sigh of relief and said, You scared me just now. You don't seem to be that daring. I thought you encountered some kind of stimulation. I will be entering the mountains in a few days. It will be dangerous, so I need to bring something to protect myself. Even so, I don't need a grenade, right? If Rinpoche wanted to enter the mountains with a gun or a crossbow, it would be understandable. But why would he bring a grenade? Carrying things wasn't something that could be played around. I have already said that it will be dangerous. There will be many wild beasts. Sometimes a gun isn't that useful, Rinpoche replied. You can use a rifle. No matter what you encounter, you will be dead after firing a crossbow. Rinpoche shook his head. Using a rifle would be too conspicuous. Even though a military crossbow was filled with a modern industrial vibe, it wasn't as conspicuous as a rifle. Even though the Empress already had some speculations in her heart, she couldn't let others have some suspicions. Furthermore, if she really encountered danger and the opponent was a human, a rifle would easily raise the opponent's vigilance. The concealment of a handgun was much higher. As for a grenade, it gave people the feeling that it was more like a piece of metal. It wasn't so easy to raise people's vigilance. There might even be fools who would use their hands to catch it. Even if they didn't catch it, they wouldn't hide far away. Rinpoche's idea was to use a crossbow for hunting. If he really encountered danger and needed to make a move, he would use a handgun and a silencer. He would try his best not to let others find out and avoid exposing too many things. A handgun, a grenade, a military crossbow, as well as a silencer, bullets and crossbow bolts. The bulletproof vest must be light and anesthetic that can be smeared on the crossbow bolts must be strong. Also, I need a military knife, Rinpoche calmly said. In order to save his life, he had to prepare as much as possible. When Qin Qing heard the things that Rinpoche wanted, he frowned and said, "I always feel that you are not going into the mountains. Instead, you are going to war. However, I won't ask too much. I can help you get them. Do you have any requests? Also, when do you need them?" "I don't have many requests. You know that I don't know anything about these things. I just want them to be as powerful as possible. However, time is tight." There were also 2 crossbows hanging at the side. One was big and the other was small. Both of them had scopes and were hung on the wall. "They are here. Take a look." Chapter 91. I don't know much about these things. I need a pistol that is more powerful, has less recoil, and has higher accuracy. Is there a requirement for distance? The man asked. Playing in the woods, I think a distance of tens of meters is the most, Rinpoche said. He deliberately used the word play. The man got up and took a black pistol from the shelf and placed it on the table. This is a domestic-made QSG-92, it should meet your requirements. A few days ago, someone on the internet put this gun in the top 10 famous guns list. Although it was a rumor, this gun is really good. Moreover, it is cheap. The only drawback is that it jams sometimes. Is there anything else besides this? Rinpoche was a little scared when he heard about jams. If it suddenly jams when he was waiting for help, he would have no place to cry. CZ-83 check, safe and reliable. There is a 9M. The man picked up another gun and placed it on the table. What's the difference? Rinpoche asked. The 9M is more powerful, but the shooting range is shorter. Rinpoche played with the CZ-83. Every man was interested in 2 things, guns and cars. Rinpoche was no exception. He never thought he would have the opportunity to own a gun. This one, I want a 9M. The recoil won't be too strong, right? Rinpoche immediately said. Anyway, he didn't know much about these things. As long as it was powerful, the recoil wasn't too strong, and it was safe and reliable, it would be fine. Moreover, this gun was very comfortable to hold. For a man, these are all small things. The man laughed. Then he made Rinpoche make a posture of holding the gun with both hands and patted the bottom of his wrists. About this much strength. Following which, Rinpoche bought a military crossbow, bullets, spare magazines, crossbow bolts, silencers, 3 grenades, and a 20-centimeter long military knife. Rinpoche spent a sum of money to bring these things back to the car. He was on tenterhooks on the way back, fearing that he would encounter a drunk driver. He never worried in the past, but now there were a lot of prohibited items in the car. If he was caught, it wouldn't just be a tragic ending for him. After returning to that world, Rinpoche didn't know what would happen to him after disappearing for a few days in the detention center. He was certain that it wouldn't end well. Fortunately, such a melodramatic thing did not happen. Rinpoche successfully sent the items back to his residence. Then he went to the hospital to get the anesthetic that could be used on the crossbow. For the next 2 days, he spent his time practicing his marksmanship and crossbow at the shooting range. While Rinpoche was practicing his spear skills in China, the empress was sitting in the palace and drinking wine. Not long after, the 7th prince was brought in. Greetings to the Empress of Dayo. The 7th prince cupped his fists and said. Rinpoche pulled the mountain-gazing bird out and patted its head twice. The mountain-gazing bird immediately squinted its eyes in comfort. Rinpoche watched as Tai Dao tied the sleeping bag and other items onto the mountain-gazing bird's body. He hung the crossbow and quiver at the side, took out some perfume from the sleeping bag, and sprayed it all over the mountain-gazing bird's body. Then he flipped over and sat on it. Achoo! As soon as Rinpoche sat on the mountain-gazing bird, he sneezed due to the strong smell of perfume. The mountain-gazing bird seemed to dislike the smell on its body and paced around restlessly. Rinpoche quickly patted its head to appease it. Help me take care of Gun Gun and Tian Tian. Rinpoche called out. Sir, water bag. Tai Dao glanced at it and quickly called out. Rinpoche slapped his forehead. He had almost forgotten about this matter. He rode the mountain-gazing bird to the well, filled the water bag and left. After leaving the beast park, he went straight to the plaza outside the palace. The assembly point was there. From afar he could see that the plaza was brightly lit. Torches were set up in the surroundings, and at the same time, the roars of humans and beasts could be heard from afar. When he got closer, he could see that there was already a large group of people at the edge of the plaza. When he got closer, he could see clearly that there were about 200 to 300 people at one side of the plaza. He could tell that they were aboriginals, and there were both men and women talking loudly. The men were all tall and big. Some of them were wearing tight-fitting silk clothes and some were wearing animal skins. Rinpoche knew that these were the sons and daughters of the court officials. If they were wearing animal skins, it was either because they liked it or because this was the great hunt. Therefore they dressed more traditionally. The women were about the same. Most of them had good figures and were full of vigor and energy. There wasn't a single one who was slightly plump. Their hair was tied behind their heads and they looked very heroic. At this moment these people were talking loudly. It seemed like many of them knew each other. Below them were all kinds of mounts. There were blood-red crooked cows, horses from other countries, goats, and even an elephant. Rinpoche didn't know where he got the elephant from. It was a woman, and the height of her mount made her stand out like a crane among chickens. There was also someone riding a saber-toothed tiger. When the saber-toothed tiger saw that there were so many animals around it, it seemed a little dissatisfied. It let out a low growl, but before it could make a sound, it was slapped on the head by the burly man behind it. "Be quiet, don't create trouble for me." Rinpoche looked at the mounts of these people, each one more powerful than the other. Then he looked at the mountain-gazing bird that he was riding on. A few people were aiming their crossbows through the scope. The glass of the scope and the ability to see into the distance were very magical in their eyes. They treated it as a treasure and snatched it over and over again. Rinpoche was piercing the rabbits and wild birds with a sharpened wooden stick. He felt a toothache as he looked at the other side. Those fellows had better be careful. If the crossbow was broken, how was he going to hunt in the mountains? Du Changkong sent one of them flying with a kick. Yes, he was sent flying 7 to 8 meters away. Then he elbowed another person to the ground. Following which, he ran to the back with the crossbow to show off to someone. Rinpoche couldn't see what was happening behind him as he was blocked by the imperial guards. He could only roast the rabbits and birds in peace. However, he could hear the cheers coming from behind him from time to time. When the rabbits and birds were roasted until they were half done, he sprinkled seasonings on them. Not long after, an extremely rich aroma spread far and wide. Many people who smelled the aroma craned their necks to look over to see what was so fragrant. The seasonings that Rinpoche took were only available in the palace and the beast park. Even the big shots in the imperial court didn't know about this, let alone them. After almost an hour, the rabbits and birds were roasted. Rinpoche was sweating profusely. Roasting these things wasn't an easy task. After all, he had to keep turning them to prevent them from getting burnt. After sending the rabbits and birds to the front of the imperial carriage, Qin Yuan went to fetch them. Rinpoche asked for 2 big pieces of mutton from the imperial guards and prepared to cook his dinner. This time, when the meat was just roasted, Rinpoche felt someone sitting beside him. He turned his head and saw Du Changkong grinning at him. "Where's the crossbow? I'll get it for you now." "Leave one for me," Du Changkong shouted as he ran. Rinpoche realized that this 17-year-old Du Changkong with the face of an uncle was really friendly. Not long after, Du Changkong came back with a bitter face. "I'm afraid I can't get your crossbow back. It's in the hands of Hong Lass. I can't defeat her. You promised me previously. In the end, you can't even defeat a woman and you came back empty-handed? Do you still have the prestige and ambition of a man? Can you still find a wife in the future? Others will look down on you. A man's words are like spilled water. Even if you die, you must keep your words. If you can't keep your words, can you still be called a man?" Rinpoche instigated in a low voice. As for who Hong Lass was, he didn't care at all. After being instigated by Rinpoche, Du Changkong had a determined look on his face. "Don't worry. I'll definitely get back what I promised you. I'll fight it out with Hong Lass." After finishing his sentence, he left with an imposing aura of a hero who would never return. Rinpoche looked at his back view and nodded his head. This 17-year-old rash youth was indeed unable to be provoked. Moreover, Du Changkong's gaze was always on him. Rinpoche still took a step to the side. If the other party wasn't looking for him, he could just walk over. However, his efforts were in vain. The other party was coming for him. Did you teach him those words? The woman asked him politely. Of course not. Rinpoche naturally shook his head. He couldn't take the blame for this. If he did, he would be in big trouble. Bah, a coward who dares to do it but doesn't dare to admit it, the woman said in disdain. Rinpoche was speechless. Did she really think that he was the one who taught her? He did ask him to bring back the crossbow, but he didn't expect him to add so much drama. It really wasn't me. Whether it was or not, don't even think about taking that thing back. Next time if you have the ability, come over yourself. Don't let others look down on you, coward. The woman had a look of disdain on her face. After she finished speaking, she couldn't be bothered to look at Rinpoche anymore and walked straight away. Rinpoche stood at the same spot for a while and suddenly laughed. Even though you are the son of an official, I am the son of an official. In any case, I am a secondary class, rank 6 deputy. You can do whatever you want to me? Do you really think that I am easy to bully and that anyone can pinch me for no reason? It was impossible for him not to be angry. He was still a young man. Even though his arms couldn't run horses, he was still a young man. Naturally, he was angry to be treated like this. Initially, he didn't want the crossbow, but now he really had to get it back. Otherwise, how would he be able to mingle in Dayo in the future? If he could pinch anyone who came over, he would be labeled as a coward. In the future, if someone wanted to do the same to him, what would he do? The Empress was just beside him. How could she not notice the current situation? Perhaps it wasn't a big deal now and she was too lazy to speak. But if he was a coward, what would she think? Rinpoche didn't think that the Empress, who was the 7th most powerful expert in the world, would think that he was a coward. How could he still use a subordinate who could be pinched by a few brats who came from an official's family? Thinking of this, Rinpoche wore a smile on his face as he walked step by step towards the red line. That woman had just walked back to the red line and muttered, "A coward who dares to do it but doesn't dare to admit it." However, she immediately realized that the others were looking in the direction she came from. She turned her head and saw the coward from before walking towards them with a smile on his face. However, that smile was a little cold. Rinpoche walked to the front of them, pointed to the crossbow in one of their hands and said, "That thing is mine." "Not anymore." The woman from before turned around and looked up. "What official position do you have?" Rinpoche asked with a smile. Just now, Rinpoche was indeed in the right, but it didn't mean that others would like him. On the contrary, young Sparrowhawk's mentality was actually the mentality of many people. After being exposed by Rinpoche, it would be strange if they had a good impression of him. However, in that kind of situation just now, Rinpoche had a righteous cause and the others had to stand on his side. Rinpoche held the crossbow in one hand and the barbecued meat in the other. He was somewhat helpless. In fact, he didn't want things to turn out this way. But he had to do it at that time. He originally had a lot of good stuff. If anyone could take advantage of them, then he would have a lot of trouble in the future. Snatching a crossbow wasn't actually that important, but what about the other things? He carried the things back to the mountain gazing bird and placed the crossbow on the ground. Then he sat down and started to eat the cold barbecued meat. It didn't taste as good after it cooled down, but he was already very hungry. If he didn't eat now, he wouldn't have the strength to go up the mountain in the afternoon. From his angle, he could see Hong Xian and young Sparrowhawk kneeling on one knee in front of the Empress's carriage. In fact, Rinpoche quite liked the Dayo people kneeling on one knee. At least it was more comfortable than kneeling on both knees, right? If he were to kneel on both knees, he would feel a little uncomfortable. After all, he had been educated for decades that a man's knees were gold. Kneeling on one knee was no longer a problem. After finishing a piece of barbecued meat, he was almost full. He collapsed on the grass. To be honest, he was quite nervous just now, but now he could finally relax. As for whether those people would take revenge on him in the future, he didn't even want to think about it now. He would think about it after he came down from the mountain. After lying down for a while, someone appeared beside him and took the remaining piece of barbecued meat and started to eat it. Needless to say, it was Du Changkong who was beaten like a dog just now. "Brother, you are really amazing." Du Changkong didn't forget to praise Rinpoche as he ate. Even though he couldn't get up from the shock just now, he still saw what happened. He admired Rinpoche very much. "You are really a coward, being kicked around like a ball," Rinpoche casually said. After hearing this, Du Changkong's face turned black. Hong Xian has become more powerful after not seeing her for a year. This time around, not many people can beat her. Even though he was refuting, he felt a little powerless. What's the relationship between Hong Xian and Hong Wan? Ren Baqin remembered that both of them had the surname Hong and couldn't help but ask. It seems like there is no relationship, Du Changkong replied after thinking for a while. He really didn't know much about Hong Wan. However, Hong Xian is Sir Hong Wu's granddaughter. Who's Sir Hong Wu? Ren Baqin asked curiously. He's the second most powerful person in Dayo. I wonder when I can become that powerful. Du Changkong had a look of longing on his face. Second in Dayo? Just slightly weaker than the Empress. Ren Baqin also felt that Hong Wu was indeed very powerful. Following which, he sat up abruptly. Hong Wu, the ninth most powerful person in the world? Yes, Sir Hong Wu is too powerful. Du Changkong was still looking forward to it. However, Ren Baqin felt a toothache. Hong Wu was the ninth most powerful person in the world. He had offended the granddaughter of the ninth most powerful person in the world. Chapter 98. Ren Baqin chatted with Du Changkong for a while, and at the very least he knew the identities of these people. The other was Hong Xian, the granddaughter of the ninth most powerful expert in the world, Hong Wu. Her father was called Hong Qing, and he was a military officer stationed in the southern residence, where the remnant citizens of the Hao nation resided. He also had two older brothers who also served in the army. That Shi Yuia's father was Shi Wangu, the protector general of the south and Hong Cheng's immediate superior. As for the young sparrow hawk, her name was Lu Ruoyao. Her mother was the imperial treasury's treasurer, who was in charge of money. His father was the assistant minister of the Ministry of War. His mother was a secondary third rank, while his father was a primary fourth rank. As for Du Changkong, when he introduced himself, he said proudly, "My father is the general of the left guard." Ren Baqin gritted his teeth. They were indeed the children of big shots. There were a total of 5 protectorates in Dayo. The protector general of each protectorate was the highest-ranking military officer. The 5 protectorates were in charge of the military forces of the 5 regions. Moreover, as a protector general, even if he wasn't as strong as the world's number 9 expert Hong Wu, he wouldn't be too weak. There was no need to talk about Lu Ruoyao's parents. One was in charge of money, and the other was in charge of the soldiers' salaries and equipment. As for Du Changkong's father, the general of the left guards, he was secondary class, rank 3. He was also one of the 2 guards that protected Lan City and could be considered as the Empress's trusted aide. At the very least, he knew who he had offended this time. Du Changkong finished the remaining piece of barbecued meat, but it was only enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. He was barely able to prevent himself from starving. He could only wait until he reached the top of the mountain to think of a way to get some food. "Do you guys have any martial arts?" Ren Baqin asked curiously. He had long wanted to learn cultivation methods. However, caretaker Shi and Xiong Pai only knew how to temper the body. Those were the methods used by the aboriginals, and they were the inferior ones. If Rinpoche used those methods, he would probably burn himself to death in no time. He had a lot of guesses about the Qingxin Palace Hall, but he hadn't learned many characters yet, so naturally he didn't have the chance to search for it. Moreover, he reckoned that the real good stuff was on the second floor, where there was an old lady watching over it. It was rare for Rinpoche to get to know the son of an official. A third-rank official should have some good stuff in his hands, right? Cultivation method? You can't learn from my family. However, I do have a few books from Great Xia at home. If you want it, give me something good to exchange for it. Chapter 100. Rinpoche, who was climbing up the tree, cried out in pain. After the baby ass pounced on the tree, they used the tree trunk as leverage and scurried up. Even though Rinpoche had already climbed more than 2 meters high, his buttocks were still scratched by their claws. Rinpoche made use of a relatively thick branch above him and flipped himself up. Those baby ass were still trying their best to jump up. The only good news was that baby ass couldn't climb trees. Even though they could use the tree trunk to jump higher, they couldn't reach Rinpoche, who was more than 3 meters above the ground. Rinpoche, who was riding on the tree trunk, felt a burning pain in his buttocks. Damn it, I was almost F***ed. Rinpoche cursed. He looked at the baby ass below him as if they had stolen his wife. Now that you can't reach me, it's your turn to be unlucky. Rinpoche took the crossbow from his back and loaded it with an arrow. He aimed down and pulled the trigger. Following a blood-curdling scream, the body of one of the baby ass was penetrated by the crossbow arrow. The death of the baby ass made the others even more furious. One by one they stood up and clung onto the tree trunk, but they couldn't climb up no matter how hard they tried. Bastards, don't you dare leave. Rinpoche grimaced in pain as he aimed at the baby ass one by one. How dare they touch my buttocks? I have to take revenge. Do they really think my buttocks are so easy to touch? When he killed the third baby ass, the remaining 3 baby ass finally had the intention to retreat. They bared their teeth at Rinpoche before running back to where they came from. Rinpoche raised his crossbow and took aim for a while before shooting another arrow. This time the arrow hit the leg of a bay beast. That bay beast howled miserably as it limped and disappeared from sight with the crossbow in tow. After the baby ass left, Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. He touched his buttocks. His hand was bleeding and it was extremely painful. He didn't even dare to sit down and could only sit on the tree branch with the other half of his buttocks. Climbing trees was indeed an essential skill for surviving in the wild. Fortunately, he often visited his grandfather in the countryside with his father. He also stole bird eggs and developed a strong tree climbing skill. Otherwise, even if he had a gun, he wouldn't be able to survive against the 6 baby ass. Even if he could keep his life, he would be injured all over, and it wouldn't just be a small injury to his butt. After the baby ass left, Rinpoche wasn't in a hurry to get down from the tree. He pondered in his heart, it seems that the smell of blood can attract beasts, right? Why don't I cut open those baby ass and bleed them to see if I can attract some animals over? In any case, he didn't know where to look for that bay. It would be best if it attracted them, but if it didn't, he would just have to stay on the tree until noon tomorrow. It was safer than running around. The more Rinpoche thought about it, the more he felt that it was a good idea. If that was the case, it wouldn't be difficult to endure until noon tomorrow. As long as he could attract some animals, he could kill 2 of them. Even if he couldn't kill the bay, he could still report back. At this time, he was immersed in the joy of finding a way to easily endure until tomorrow. His butt did not feel so painful anymore and there was a smile on his face. He felt refreshed and he was just short of singing majestic. Let out the blood of those baby ass first and retrieve the crossbow bolts. Rinpoche made up his mind and slipped down from the tree. One by one, he dragged the baby ass corpses to a place slightly further away. Following which, he plucked out the crossbow bolts and placed them back into the quiver without wiping them. Next, he took out his military knife and cut open the baby ass stomachs one by one, allowing the smell of blood to be even stronger. After he was done, Rinpoche crawled back to the path he came from. He first climbed up to a height of about 4 meters. He felt that it wasn't very comfortable there as the tree branches were thinner. Hence, he climbed back to his original position. The next step was to wait and see if any fish would take the bait. Taking advantage of this time, He tore a piece of cloth from his clothes and bandaged the wound on his butt. He had to admit that it wasn't easy to bandage this area. Every time he touched it he would feel a sharp pain. After Rinpoche bandaged the wound with great difficulty, no fish took the bait. However, he heard someone screaming in pain from afar. "Which unlucky fellow is that?" Rinpoche gloated. It definitely wasn't an aboriginal. It should be one of those signs. However, they only brought along a follower. Furthermore, they were still in the periphery. There shouldn't be any powerful beasts. Ah, so powerful? He has been shouting for 2 minutes without taking a breath. He's even more powerful than Luciano Pavarotti. Rinpoche muttered to himself while frowning. This was because the sound seemed to be coming from his direction from afar. Furthermore, it wasn't slow. When he first heard the sound, he estimated that it was about 200 to 300 meters away from him. Now it was less than 100 meters away. Furthermore, it wasn't just that person's scream. There was also the sound of a relatively large object colliding in the forest and the sound of a tree trunk collapsing. Boom! When that figure appeared in front of Rinpoche, a tree that wasn't considered very thick was knocked down. Following which, a giant wild boar that was at least 2 meters tall appeared in front of Rinpoche. Its fangs were more than half a meter long and looked like 2 long swords that were stuck in its mouth. Chapter 101. Just when Rinpoche was hesitating whether he should jump down and run in another direction or stay here and try his luck, Ning Kaichen saw a few bay beast corpses on the ground. He raised his head and looked around. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he waved his hand at Rinpoche. Rinpoche's position was easily recognizable. "What the hell are you waving at?" Rinpoche cursed in his heart and pointed to the side. At the same time he pointed his crossbow at Ning Kaichen. His meaning was clear. "Run in that direction and don't mess with me." Ning Kaichen was very tactful. When he saw Rinpoche's hand gesture he shouted, "Ah! Ow!" She made a turn and passed by a tree that wasn't far from where Rinpoche was hiding. That bulldozer-like wild boar also ran past the tree by a hair's breadth. Phew! Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Ning Kaichen didn't drag him down with him. Otherwise he would have shot him with the crossbow. Such a huge wild boar could probably be the king of this forest. "Ning Kaichen, you are very loyal this time. I will burn incense for you. Have a safe journey." Rinpoche expressed his gratitude sincerely. After the movements of Ning Kaichen and the wild boar were far away, Rinpoche continued to sit on the tree. This nearby tree was the most suitable. Since the wild boar had been lured away, there was no need for him to change his location. Not long after, silhouettes began to appear in the surroundings. They were all fox-like creatures. They looked greedily at the bay beast corpses on the ground. However, they didn't rush over. Instead, they circled around the area to see if there was any danger. "These things aren't prepared for you guys." Rinpoche spoke softly and shot an arrow at one of the foxes. However, the arrow was slightly off. That fox was immediately frightened and all its fur stood up. After looking around, it turned into the forest. The other foxes circled around. They couldn't bear to leave, but they didn't dare to go near. Rinpoche shot another arrow and pierced through another fox. The other foxes immediately turned into the forest and disappeared without a trace. After doing this, Rinpoche continued to wait. Since he had nothing to do, he checked his waist bag and found a plastic bottle. Only then did he remember that he had brought anesthetic with him. Just now, he was so nervous that he had forgotten about it. However, it would not be easy to knock out such a huge wild boar with anesthetic. However, he still soaked the front end of the crossbow bolt in the bottle and only took it out after more than 10 seconds. After waiting for a while, she suddenly heard the sound of footsteps. She turned her head and looked in the direction of the sound. To her surprise, it was Ning Kaichen again. She didn't know where he had left the wild boar behind him. Ning Kaichen climbed up the tree in a few steps. His movements were very accurate. It seemed like he had done a lot of climbing trees to get bird eggs. Covered in dirt, he crawled to Rinpoche's side and sat down. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, "You scared me to death just now. They almost caught up to me. Luckily I ran fast." "You actually got rid of him? How did you offend him?" Rinpoche asked. As long as Ning Kaichen could get rid of the wild boar, he did not mind having a companion. In fact, it was quite boring to stay on the tree alone. Upon hearing Rinpoche's question, Ning Kaichen was at a loss. "I don't know either. I was walking in the forest when that guy suddenly rushed out as if he had killed his father. Fortunately, we managed to shake them off." "Are you alone?" Rinpoche asked again. I heard that the beasts in the mountains and forests of Dayo are different from those in Great Xia. I just came up to take a look and didn't think of any rewards." Ning Kaichen smiled embarrassedly. Ning Kaichen was also a travel enthusiast. From this point of view he was quite daring. "Let's stay here first. It's safer than going down there," Rinpoche said. After finishing his sentence, he pricked up his ears and listened carefully. "Did you hear anything?" Ning Kaichen listened attentively as well. Soon after, his gaze froze. Boom! Both of them heard the sound of a tree crashing to the ground, following which they saw a huge figure sniffing the ground. It raised its head and stared fixedly in the direction of Rinpoche and Ning Kaichen before charging over. "Damn it!" Rinpoche cursed. It was unknown whether he was cursing Ning Kaichen or the wild boar. He immediately jumped to the ground, rolled on the ground, and ran away with all his might. "It will chase after you. You better stay away from me." Rinpoche didn't forget to shout. He immediately dived into the forest and ran for quite a distance. When he realized that Ning Kaichen and the huge wild boar weren't running in his direction, he slowed down his pace. His lungs were burning. He recovered as he walked. He didn't want to know how the wild boar targeted Ning Kaichen. He just wanted to find a suitable tree to climb and rest on. No matter what, it was safer to stay on a tree. Rinpoche felt himself getting more and more tired. Now that he was going uphill, running was tiring. Now that the danger was temporarily resolved and the wild boar was chasing after Ning Kaichen, Rinpoche stopped and leaned against a tree to rest. "Hey, isn't this Deputy Rin?" Just as Rinpoche stopped and leaned against the tree, two people appeared from behind the tree in front of him. Rinpoche felt that the voice was familiar. He looked up and recognized the person. It was Lian Baoqing, the brain-damaged second generation. He was wearing a brocade robe. In front of him was the guard who used a knife to stop Mr. Emptiness from spitting out a mouthful of blood. "What AF * king coincidence," Rinpoche said unhappily, but his heart was in his throat. "The seventh prince isn't the son of Great Xia's emperor," Rinpoche gritted his teeth and said. "Nonsense. How is that possible?" When Lian Baoqing heard this, he could no longer maintain his composure. His face was filled with shock. As Rinpoche spoke, he threw the crossbow on the ground and took out a dark green elliptical sphere with a black cover from his waist. He held it in his right hand and said, "The evidence is in here. I will give it to you and you will let me leave. If you don't promise me, I will destroy it." Rinpoche threw the crossbow on the ground. As Rinpoche spoke, cold sweat broke out on his forehead. When the other party saw his expression, they thought that he was afraid. Indeed, he was afraid, but he was afraid that the thing in his hand would suddenly explode. Although it would not explode if the safety clip was pressed, he was still afraid. If anything happened, he would be smashed to pieces. Lian Baoqing looked at Rinpoche and laughed. "Yen Wei is within 10 steps of you. Do you think you have the chance to destroy it?" Rinpoche's face changed. "Do you think it's so easy to get your hands on this? I can tell you that there are 2 layers. The innermost layer is the evidence, and the outermost layer is strong acid. If I fall on the ground, the acid will destroy the innermost layer. You can choose. Do you want to kill me or do you want to keep this secret?" After hearing what Rinpoche said, Lian Baoqing pondered for a while, then nodded his head and said, "All right, I promise you. Give me the things and I will let you go." Rinpoche said, "Swear that you will let me go and not lay a finger on me for a day." Lian Baoqing smiled and said, "Okay, I promise you." On a tree not far away from the two of them, a man looked at the scene below and hesitated. He didn't know if he should snatch the thing from Lian Baoqing. This secret should be handed over to Her Majesty. Judging from the man's expression, it was obvious that he didn't take his promise seriously. He knew that as long as storyteller Ren handed the thing over, the other party would kill him immediately. This storyteller Ren was too stupid to actually expose such a secret. No matter who the other party was, they wouldn't let him leave alive. This secret was too important. Rinpoche clenched his teeth. He suddenly raised his hand and threw the green ball at Lian Baoqing. Then he turned around and ran. Yen Wei jumped up and grabbed the green ball. He sneered. "Do you think you can run away? Give me the thing and kill him." Lian Baoqing was ecstatic. If what Rinpoche said was true, even if he killed an earth wheel expert, he would be able to explain himself when he returned. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared and pounced toward Yen Wei. No matter what, he had to snatch the evidence first. This was too important even if he had to expose himself. Ren Baqin, who turned around and ran, also paid attention to his back. At the same time he counted in his heart, 1, 2, 3. Then he threw himself forward. Yan Wei had just received the green ball when he had a bad feeling. At the same time he realized that someone was pouncing toward him from the forest. He turned his body slightly and pointed the long saber in his hand at the other party. "Who's there?" Boom. The green ball in Yan Wei's hand suddenly exploded. A huge flame and airflow spread out from a point with countless fragments. Yan Wei was sent flying by the huge explosion. At the same time his left hand disappeared. At the same time, countless fragments hit his body. His whole body was like a broken puppet and there wasn't any sound at all. His entire upper body was missing like a broken doll. Even half of his head was missing. Lian Baoqing was shocked by the explosion and the loud sound. He subconsciously covered his head with both hands and sat on the ground. That black figure forcefully twisted its body in the air, stepped on a tree trunk beside Lian Wei and flew sideways. A few seconds later, it disappeared into the shade. After confirming that he was out of sight, Wu Fang checked his body. Even though the explosion was relatively far away from him, it still affected him. There were a few metal fragments on his body. Those fragments were too fast and too close to him. He couldn't dodge them in time. Fortunately, they only pierced into his skin and weren't very deep. Liar. Wu Fang gritted his teeth. He pulled out the two biggest shrapnel from his body and tore a few strips of cloth to bandage his wounds. If he still didn't know that Ren Baqin was a complete liar, he would be a fool. Previously he thought that Ren Baqin was stupid. Now he felt that he was stupid. He was angry that he was cheated. Chapter 103. Ren Baqin clenched his teeth as he passed through the smoke. His gaze swept across Yan Wei's tattered body and immediately felt a little nauseous. However, most of his attention was on Lian Baoqing, who was sitting there in a daze. Lian Baoqing couldn't figure out what had just happened. How did that green sphere suddenly explode into countless fragments, along with that huge sound wave and a ball of flame? How did his guard leader die just like that? Even though Yan Wei had just attained the earth wheel level, he could be considered a small expert. Even though the Lian family wasn't considered the top in Great Xia, they were considered outstanding among the second-rate families. There were only 6 earth wheel experts in the family. The practitioners in Great Xia were divided into the spirit wheel level, also known as the wisdom palace. Next was the heaven wheel level, also known as the path to heaven. Below that was the earth wheel level, also known as the earth embryo level. Below that was the man wheel level. Most practitioners couldn't even attain the man wheel level. Only 1 out of 100 practitioners could attain the man wheel level and truly control the body. Only 1 out of 1,000 man wheel practitioners could attain the earth wheel level. It could be said that this was 1 in 100,000 practitioners. Even those who had just attained the earth wheel level could obtain the position of a deputy general in the army. Those who reached the peak of the earth wheel level could be considered experts. Only those who reached the peak of the earth wheel level could be called the earth embryo level and could borrow the power of the earth. As long as they stood on the ground, they could absorb the earth's energy to restore their physical strength. Having 1 foot in the earth wheel level meant that they had the potential to attain the earth embryo level. If they were lucky, they could even break through the heavenly gate and step onto the path to heaven. Such people would be valued everywhere. The Lian family had spent countless efforts over the years to nurture and recruit 6 earth wheel experts, which was enough to show how precious they were. He had always been favored by his father. Furthermore, he came to Dayo, so he was paired with 2 experts who had just attained the earth wheel level. One was Lian Baoqing and the other was Yan Wei. A few days ago, Lian Baqin was ordered to be trampled to death by that mad dog. Even if he was favored by his father, he wouldn't be able to escape punishment. As a result, he hated Ren Baqin to death and wished he could skin him and eat his flesh. On one hand he was humiliated and on the other hand it was because of this. After confirming the direction of Ren Baqin, Lian Baqin and Yan Wei returned in this direction. He was originally looking for Deputy Ren, but he didn't expect Ren Baqin to appear in front of him as if he was being chased by a dog. This almost made him burst into laughter. There was a path to heaven, but you didn't take it. Instead you barged into hell. I was looking for you and you came running in front of me. However, what happened next took a sudden turn. Yan Wei died just like that. Lian Baoqing's eyes were filled with fear and sluggishness. The fear was because of what had just happened, and the sluggishness was because of Yan Wei's corpse. He hadn't even seen the Empress and 2 earth wheel experts were already dead. When he returned, he would definitely be punished according to the family rules. Thinking of his own ending made him tremble all over. Ren Baqin held the gun and walked to within 10 meters of Lien Baoqing. He pointed the gun at Lien Baoqing and took a deep breath. Lien Baoqing recovered from his daze and saw Ren Baqin, who wasn't far from him, raising his hand and pointing the black object at him. What was that? Lien Baoqing didn't think too much about it. He was about to go crazy. Are you lying to me? Lien Baoqing looked at Ren Baqin with reddened eyes. He still had a glimmer of hope in his heart that what Ren Baqin said was true. If that was the case, he would still be able to explain himself when he returned. He was like a drowning man who would not let go of anything he could grab onto. Isn't this nonsense? Lien Baoqing stared at Ren Baqin as if he had a rabid dog. I will kill you and bury you with him. He pounced on Ren Baqin ferociously. Even though his martial arts weren't very good, he had practiced for a few days when he was young. He hadn't even reached the threshold of the man-wheel level. However, everyone could see that Ren Baqin didn't know any martial arts at all. Therefore, the only thought in Lien Baoqing's mind right now was to kill this bastard who caused him to end up like this. No matter what, he had to kill him. He also believed that he would definitely be able to kill Yan Wei. If Yan Wei was like this, Ren Baqin would still be a little worried. This was also the reason why he didn't dare to take out his gun. If he couldn't kill Yan Wei, he would be dead meat. But now, facing Lien Baoqing, he didn't have to worry at all. Ren Baqin looked at Lien Baoqing as if he was looking at a fool. His fingers slightly trembled as he pulled the trigger. Bang, bang, bang. 3 crisp but soft gunshots were heard. It wasn't like the sound of a silencer installed on a TV or in a game. Ren Baqin only knew this when he was practicing at the shooting range. The sound of a silencer could only reduce the sound of gunshots, but it was still a bang, or 2 sound. Following the 3 gunshots, Lien Baoqing froze on the spot. He raised his arm and touched his chest. All the strength in his body gradually disappeared. The expression on his face changed from anger to incredulity and fear. What exactly was in his opponent's hand? Plop. Lien Baoqing fell to the ground. He could only breathe in and not out. Just now, a shot had hit his lung and blood was spurting out of his mouth. Ren Baqin went behind him, aimed at Lien Baoqing's back and fired another shot. Only then did he feel more at ease. This wasn't the first time he put someone to death. He had already taken a few lives under his orders, but today was the first time he killed someone with his own hands. In particular, Lien Baoqing was killed by him, which made him feel somewhat uncomfortable. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. However, the tightness in his heart was still there. Wu Fong, who was hiding under the shade of a tree, squinted his eyes. Why did this storyteller Ren have so many strange things on him? Initially, he didn't know why Her Majesty was so interested in a foreigner. Now he more or less understood. Ren Baqin sat on the ground. Just now he didn't seem to have done much, but he was really nervous. He didn't have any confidence in facing Yan Wei with a gun. In the end, he told a big lie and threw a grenade at Yan Wei. If he failed, he would probably have to draw his gun and fight it out with Yan Wei. However, he didn't have any confidence in winning. Even a crossbow arrow could be blocked by a knife. Could a gun really deal with it? Fortunately, Lien Baoqing was from Great Xia. The lie that the 7th prince wasn't the biological son of the emperor had indeed attracted the attention of Yan Wei and caused him to have all sorts of greedy thoughts. Now he had won. All the strength in his body was gone. After sitting on the ground for a few minutes, Ren Baqin thought about the 2 corpses. The explosion of the grenade just now wasn't soft. He was afraid that it would attract people. If no one came, the corpses of the 2 would be eaten by wild beasts in no time. Unfortunately, the explosion just now was too loud. Even though it wasn't easy to meet people in this forest, there were still many people in the surroundings. In particular, such an explosion would probably attract many people's attention. Presumably, people would come soon. There wasn't enough time for him to move the corpses away. Ren Baqin didn't dare to delay any longer. He got up to pick up the crossbow and carried it on his back. Then he went to look for Yan Wei's knife. When he came back, he slashed Yan Wei's body a few times until the corpse was beyond recognition. Even though he couldn't tell how Yan Wei died since the people in this world didn't know about grenades, he still did it. Only then did he feel a little more at ease. After all, he was just an ordinary person previously. He didn't know how to destroy corpses and didn't have the time to do so. He could only do as much damage as he wanted. He endured the disgust and cut open Lien Baoqing's abdomen to look for the bullet in his stomach. However, as he searched, his stomach turned upwards until it reached his throat before he could push it back down. Ren Baqin really didn't dare to think about anything else. It was too disgusting. He was afraid that he would vomit now. The 9mm bullet he used had a strong stopping effect, but its penetrative ability was average. Even at a distance of 10 meters, it might not be able to penetrate a human body. Finally, he found 2 bullets in Lien Baoqing's stomach. One bullet was fired from his chest when he stepped on Lien Baoqing's back. He couldn't find the last bullet. After doing all this, Rinpoche cut off half of Lien Baoqing's neck. He didn't dare to delay any longer. He looked around and couldn't find the crossbow arrow. After he was far away, he couldn't help but bend over and vomit. Ordering others to kill, personally using a gun to kill, and finally cutting open the other party's abdomen to look for bullets were 2 completely different things. Just now, Rinpoche almost couldn't hold it in anymore, but he forcefully endured it. At this moment, he vomited out everything in his stomach. After vomiting stomach acid for a long time, he gulped down a few mouthfuls of water to recover his strength. Then he walked away again. He didn't walk far before he heard the sound of a stream. He followed the sound. The stream wasn't big and it was so clear that he could see the bottom. He could see a few fish swimming in it. After Rinpoche confirmed that there was no danger, he splashed a lot of cold water on his face. This made him feel much better. Then he slowly cleaned the bloodstains on his hands. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.